We've had such a wonderful time working on the definitive edition of Age of Empires that we want to make sure that we take the same care with Age of Empires 2 and 3, so we're going to be doing definitive editions of both of those titles.
So we are here with TheViper, who's the NAC3 champion. And
the champion of Wololo 5, we have TheViper.
My friends around the world, join me in congratulating the Age of Empires 2 Red Bull Wololo Legacy champion. It is Tato!
Ladies and gentlemen, your Grand Melee champion, Hera! And he calls the GG Hera. Winning NAC 4, dominant run from him in a game 9. And the GG is coming in. Hera, no one here can stop him as he takes the NAC 5 championship.
Age of Empires 2 has been around for a long time now, and it's been a classic and household name in the RTS genre, and it's been going strong for 25 years and still pushing to this date.
What's up, guys, and welcome back to the final day of the Escape Champions League.
However, the 25 years that this game has existed have a lot of ups and downs, and there's been a lot of cool things that have happened that a lot of people might not know about, because the history of Age of Empires is not something that's truly well documented. And I wanted to make this video to cover what happened from the start of this game's career in 1999, covering all the major events up until today in 2024. Of course, I couldn't make a history video about Age of Empires 2 on my own, since I only started playing around 2012 myself, so I had to call up someone who was playing since the start of the game and is still competing at the highest level even today. An absolute legend of the game. We've got here Doubt.
If you want to be a safe surfer, we have an amazing deal here. It's called Surfshark.
Hello. Well, thank you for inviting Hera. And yeah, I didn't play competitive from the first year, but I have quite a good info about the full history of Age of Empires.
Perfect. And together we're going to go ahead and break down the history of Age of Empires 2 from the start in 1999 all the way until today. And we're going to be covering the meta that was around in the pro play. We're going to be covering the tournaments that were taking place, as well as some of the pro players and teams that were, taking part and dominating the scene across all the different eras this game has survived. We'll also be doing some, few questions here and there to cover some interesting facts that you guys might be curious about. And we'll also be covering some community atmosphere and where the game was even played, because it really went through a lot of different eras and changes. Age of Empires 2 officially launched in September 27th of 1999, and it was the sequel to the game Age of Empires 1, and it's coming bigger and better in the form of Age of Kings.
Age of Kings was released at 99, but we didn't get the first event until 2000. And oh boy, we get the event. The first major event was World Cyber Games, live event in South Korea with quite a bit of prize pool, $50,000, right? Imagine that. Compared to today, that's probably like 100K. Right off the bat, everybody is just like playing casually. It was far away from esport, and we are having such an amazing event live. And the funniest thing was the whole event was played best of one. In the first tournament, obviously, we didn't know much about the game. Like, luring the board was already like a massive impact for the game. And the meta was Hans War. Hans War all the way. No need to build houses. Was such amazing bonus at that point. And you have to recall, back to those days, we had the way less tips as well. It was usually Mongols or Huns, and sometimes Chinese, but because of the lag and everything, Chinese were not such a high popular pick. Now, at the beginning, it was just skirms. And the main reason for the skirm meta was villagers with Loom had one less pierce armor. So skirms were actually killing the villagers. And scouts didn't get +2 attack in Feudal Age, at least not right away. That came later on with 1.0 C patch.
Okay, so you said it was Mongols and Huns that were mainly dominating, of course, Huns being the primary pick for the players. Was there extensive training and testing going into this tournament, or was it really just, as you said, a casual scene with whoever was basically the best at the time competing in the tournament? Were there any qualifiers? How did people know that they were good enough to compete in this tournament?
That's a bit... For the first tournament, I was, 13 years old. I was not part of the community. That I learned as I started playing more competitive, and from the info I got from the older players. But World Cyber Games was not a normal tournament. It was more like Olympics. Every country sent a player. So your own country need to organize qualification to get to the main event. And plenty of countries didn't do that, right? They didn't recognize esport at all.
Wow, interesting. So it's basically just a tournament slapped together, and whoever was able to get there, whoever's country was invested, got there and was able to play. And who actually won that tournament?
The first tournament was won by the Grant. No. Scratch that. Mozori. He is Korean player, but not Grant.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so you talked about how the meta was more or less a skirm meta because people were, of course, not able to go scouts and feudal. They didn't get the extra 2 attack. And of course, the loom didn't affect the villagers in the same way that it does today. How were people playing with skirmishers? Was it like a 2-range build? How fast would they get into feudal age? And were they going for a heavy feudal age, or was it more of like a little bit of aggression into castle age?
It was only skirmishes. And 24-25 pop-up time was impressive, right? We didn't have the small trees, we had a lot of lag. And most important thing, before you lure the boar, the first boar, you do loom. That was the meta. Once we learn about the boars that can be lured, you do loom, get the boar, and go back home. Obviously, at today's standards, you lose at least 100 resources doing loom so early. So that affects the uptime by quite a bit.
Super interesting to have loom be a must lure boar, even for the top players at the time. I mean, it makes sense because there's just so much lag. Back in the day, so loom was basically just a requirement to get those boars in. Okay, besides like the skirm meta and what people went for the majority of the time as far as opening in Age of Kings, I heard of a few really cheesy strategies that players would go for that basically had no counter. Can you let us know what some of these strategies might have been in the early stages of Age of Empires?
In Age of Empires Kings, the balance was completely off with those meme strategies. Like douching with Teutons, I believe Teutons also had a double range on TC, along with double arrows from villagers inside the TC. We didn't douche. You make a castle age and you get the TC in enemy face and you kill everything, right? Similar to Age of Empires 4 Mongol TC Rush. It was quite a messy at the beginning. And also, yeah, I forgot to mention in Age of Kings, also the fast castle job was kind of the meta at the beginning. Well, not a meta, it's a brand new game, right? Nobody knew what meta was.
Yeah.
Like luring the boars, I think that was the first step into introducing actually the feudal age play.
Interesting. So you had fast castle drop, you had the Teuton town center drop, and as far as I knew, there was no halberdier available. So as far as a bad balance goes, if you get to like something like Frank Paladin, what can really be the counter? I guess you have a heavy camo, but you basically have no other option as long as you didn't have like a civ specific counter to it. I think you just died, no?
Yeah, that's also the fact. Like Frank's paladins were unstoppable. Like the pikeman was more or less useless in Imperial Age. It still is, right? But with halberdier, you have efficient counter. We did not have that back in the days, right? But like you said, the era was very short. It was like 6-7 months, and we didn't have the professional players. Not every single aspect of the game was tested enough to know that we need halberdier upgrade. You could close and open the gate, and it goes up and down. If unit goes below the gate, you close it and you kill the unit. There was also one more change. Bomber towers used to do the full damage to the rams. So having like 2 bomber towers to protect yourself against ram push, that was like most used when you play against AI. Like you make 2 bomber towers and AI is pushing with rams. That was kind of, well, AI, I mean, the single player was kind of the most popular thing, right?
Of course.
And when we realized that, that was, I think every player in the world who played single player knew about that and used it against AI.
The bomber tower meta to keep the AI from doing any damage. That's amazing. That's great. Okay, moving on from the Age of Kings era, which only lasted a total of 8 months, 10 months, because in August of 24 in the year 2000, the Age of Conquerors was released, which is basically the first major patch for Age of Kings. And as far as I know, it basically released as a new game. You can have the Age of Kings disc, and you can have the new disc, Age of Conquerors, which was basically an expansion, an old school expansion to the game, releasing 4 new civilizations, all kinds of changes, as well as, a brand new game and brand new meta for the players to enjoy. How was the early days of the Age of Conquerors in terms of the meta and early developments for you there?
Well, Age of Conquerors completely shifted the game. Now we can open scouts. The skirmisher opening was still very popular because, well, it was a habit, right? It was hard to switch. And again, you have to mention the lag. Controlling the scouts with the lag, it was not an easy task. You would usually make 2-3 scouts and then switch to the skirmish again, until the economy booms out, because we didn't know what castle age is. We play feudal age for very long. We didn't wall. We play a lot of skirms, and then as your economy progress, you can switch to the scouts, and then it's mostly just scout war.
Very interesting. Okay, so the meta was scouts and skirms for an extended feudal age. Were there any big tournaments with the launch of Age of Conquerors? Of course, we had the one big tournament for Age of Kings. Did Microsoft want to invest more into the esports side of the scene very early on with this launch, or were there other sponsors that were interested in making tournaments in the early days of Age of Conquerors?
Believe it or not, the first major event in 2001, $95,000 tournament, LAN
Wow.
event in USA, and believe it or not, it was played best of fun.
Best of
It
one
was
every
played
time.
best of fun. Maps were unfair, like meta was unknown, but it was best of fun. Let's go 100K. And the funniest thing about that tournament was Chris, the new rising star. He was maybe like 13, 14 at that age. He was not allowed to compete as a minor. Literally learned from his mistake. He was lying from his age for a decade or so.
Wow, so they denied Chris access because he was a minor. And so who ended up winning that tournament?
That tournament was won by Grant. Yeah, that was the
Grant.
first major event won by the Grant. And that's where the meta shifted to a forward. Believe it or not, we start with forwarding right away. There were two type of the players. Oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, and forwarding with like skirms?
Yes. Like at that point, the meta was like we have two type of players, defensive and aggressive. Those that are aggressive, oh boy, are they aggressive. Like they always forward no matter what. Like the forward is coming, deal with it. It was crazy. Like slowly we start shifting to making like 2 militia in the barrack. When you spot the forward, you send 2 militia and like 5-6 villagers to fight the villagers off. And it creates more of a mess for you than for the forward player. He just like make the full circle around with villagers at home and send a new group to keep forward. Like forward players never stop.
Super interesting. And were they forwarding with the intention of making towers, forward skirms, or did they actually want to actively like vil fight and maybe like wall in your buildings? What were their go-to idea with the forward?
The forward, like the tower, was not such a massive thing. Obviously, you make a first tower and that's it. You don't have villagers on stone. But it was all about getting the forward buildings, and it was always 2 range forward. You get those, and it's weird to say from today's perspective, but back in the days, everybody panicked. Like you see the forward buildings, and you're like, now I have the pressure in front of my base the whole game. Although it's only skirms, although it's not that much pressure when you see today, but at that point, you just panic. And often, even when the ranges happen, you send like 7, 8, 10 villagers forward just to wall in those ranges. Again, creating more mess to you than to your opponent.
Okay, so going into this tournament, you did say Grunt won the whole thing. Was Grunt considered to be the best player at the time? Because even in today's world, we do hear a lot of stories about how Grunt was dominating. There's a couple other names thrown in there as well. Were the pro players known, or did this tournament kind of like make the pro players who they are?
Well, as every esport started at that age, Korea was the main country, right? We had Coven, we had RD Champion, and we have Grunt. They were absolutely dominating the scene. Like Cohen was considered the best player, but his tournament results were not that high, right? It is best of one. What can I do? Yeah. So Grant ended up winning most of those main events. Well, actually only that one now when I see. But I know Grant. I met him. He is super professional. When there is a tournament, he will play like 20 games before every match against AI. Just build order, and ready to jump into the game right away.
Makes sense to do that since it's best of one. You basically have to bring your best foot forward. There's no first game of the day. There's no, unlucky. You have to basically just do your best in that one game, and that's all you have.
Yeah, and the funny thing is also that first major 100K event, it was called International Tournament 2001, and it was 4 rounds. Best of fun. First map, first round, Archipelago. Second round, Arabia. Third round, semifinals, Mediterranean. And the finals, Highland. That's it. 4 maps, each round, 1 map, 1 game. That's it.
If we got those tournament settings today, there'd be an uprising from the players, from the viewers, and the casters would complain about it. It would be an absolute disaster. 4 maps, and I love how Highland was the finals. Like, it wasn't even Arabia. It was just a random Highlands map. Super interesting to hear about that. And as far as where the players played before the tournaments, or aside of the tournaments, there was something called the Zone built into the actual Age of Conquerors, the game, the online portion of the game. Is this where they played?
Yeah, Microsoft Zone was the first thing. And talking about Microsoft Zone, it brings memories and nostalgia. Basically, how do you even explain it to the new kids? Like, we had rooms where you join, and each room had like 300 players capacity. And usually there were 2 or 3 rooms full. So the player base was not that high. And usually, like, first room was where everybody joined, and it's hardest to get. in second room, usually it's the players from the first room as well, just having it as a backup if you crash or something. So the player base was not that high, and getting to the room number one was a task. You spam for like 20 minutes plus to get into the room and then start searching for the game.
Wow. And was it like a queue system, or did you have to like message someone to set up the game? How would you set up the game back then?
When you open that room, well, it's kind of a lobby. Then you can host your own rooms where players will see and join. And rooms are named with the number, right? Like game 1, game 2, and so on. And game 1, game 2 were always occupied. Like you never want to leave for some reason. You want to have game 1. Like you sleep on that one. Phone bill doesn't matter. I need to have game room as long as possible.
Room 1, game 1 was like where everyone wanted to be. Makes sense. And so the player base was around, let's say, 300 people per room. It was around like 600 to maybe 1,000 at that time. Did it stay consistent? Because I know Zone died out at some point. Did this player base stay consistent throughout until it died, or did it slowly decline until it eventually died out?
Yeah, obviously the player base declined as it reached the peak maybe around 2004, and in 2006, I believe, Microsoft Zone shut down. It was declining, right, slowly, especially with release of Age of Mythology 2002. A lot of players, well, moved to the brand new Microsoft game, and we didn't hear the drama like today moving to Age of Empires 4. It was normal, right? A new game in the block, you want to test it.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, because from today's standards, when Age of Empires 4 comes out, we now have Age of Empires 2 that's been out for 22 years. It's basically a household name. The people in the community are kind of worried that this game might die out. But back in the day, in the year 2000, if a new game comes out 2 years later, it's simply that, a new game. There's not this community aspect that you're worried about it dying or whatnot. Did the launch of Age of Mythology have any impact on, Age of Conquerors at this point?
For sure. Like once Age of Mythology got out, all the top players moved. Also, the World Cyber Games, the Olympics of Age of every actually RTS game, drop up Age of Empires 2 and start hosting Age of Mythology. So that was kind of go to game at that point.
Wow, super interesting. So it basically just took the spotlight from Age of Empires 2 for a decent time period, and that could have contributed to maybe potentially the death of Zone, which is the online version of Age of Conquerors. I do want to ask you something. How popular and how mainstream was Age of Conquerors or Age of Kings in those early 2000s? Was it something that was super popular that everyone played, or was it still a niche in like the RTS genre that was only for like a certain population of gamers?
Well, at that point, StarCraft was the main thing, right? StarCraft 1 in Korea, that's it. And Korea bring the rest of the world into the game because they were so into the game. They were making massive tournaments, and whoever wants to give a shot into esport, well, would have to go for the StarCraft. Age of Empires 2 was more like a lower tier, but really strong fan base because, well, it's history game. It's more fun, more options. It stays to today, right? Like you said, Age of Empires 2 fans are more, what's the right word? Hardcore? More
hardcore. Like they're more invested into the game, into the community.
Yeah, for sure. Like, and we kind of did outlive StarCraft at some point, at some degree.
So they were winning initially, and then we beat them in the battle of attrition, basically.
We start slow, but we are still there.
Excellent. And I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about, just in those early 2000s, how did you actually play the game? How was the internet and the lag? Like, how many seconds lag was there? Like, we obviously know it's a lot, but give us some details if you can. And what was the equipment available at the time? Like, how were people playing in like the screen size, the mouse, keyboard? What was the setup looking like?
The setup looks more or less like I'm using right now. At least keyboard wise. But yeah, we had the ball mouse that you need to clean like every few games or it gets stuck. And maybe most importantly, the monitor size was 14-inch. I remember once I got 17-inch monitor, I was like, man, it's so much easier to play now. It was, and the lag, don't get me started with the lag. Back then, we didn't have the servers. It was more between us, like how is your ping compared to the Europe, right?
Yeah.
And more players joined, the lag is bigger. So team games were close to impossible, but yet very popular.
Wow. So I can only imagine if there's like 8 players in a 4v4, the lag is just off the charts, basically. But I guess playing with friends is still fun.
Yeah, exactly. And usually the host was like, let's team game 44, 300 ping less. So the community divide, right?
Mm-hmm.
Asian, Europe, American players couldn't really play casual games. The problem begins when we, well, want to play a tournament, right? And then we we experience a lot of lag.
Yeah, if someone from Korea wants to play someone from like America, there's just gonna be a ton of lag, and so on and so forth. Europe to Korea is not much better. Yeah, definitely very interesting. Moving on from the early 2000s, when was the next big change for Age of Conquerors? How did the game develop after those first couple tournaments?
Big change, well, obviously it grew over the time. Now, it's worth mentioning another major event in 2001. After that 100k event tournament, World Cyber Games kicked in the same year, and that was a LAN event. Like in 2001, 2000, it was only LAN events. We never had online events. So that event, Grant finished second. The first player was I am Kem. He was a very aggressive player. He was feared. Like we didn't have the streaming. We didn't even have recorded games. You had an option to record game or not, and top players never wanted to record game, right? You don't want to share your info. But we all knew that guy, Kem. He is a rushing beast. You know what's going to happen to you, and you cannot stop it. And then going into that the tournament I follow. World Cyber Games 2001. Like you cannot follow it on stream, right? You're just waiting for tournament to finish and then wait for the recorded game to get public and watch it. And it's only one record game because it's best of one. And then you see that guy rushing.
I can only imagine the anticipation waiting for that game to come in just to see KM's rush. And KM, was he also a player from Korea at the time?
He was from Taiwan.
Okay, interesting.
And that was the first tournament also Chris played. Canada sent a player and they sent to Chris.
And how did Chris do in that tournament?
He finished top 4. Yeah, he was 4th. He was quite good. He was still very young. He lost to the Grant. I mean, best of one. It can happen. But at that point, Chris started rising and was considered the top 2, top 3 player.
And how did they consider someone like Chris to be a top 1, top 2? Is it because of the ladder ranking?
Yes, it was all about the ladder. Ladder had way more prestige. That's all we had. Online tournaments didn't exist. Like once or twice a year, there was a major LAN event, and that's about it. So everything that happens to the ladder, but you don't even see the record games most of the time, but you see like everybody's 2.4 and you see Chris 2.5 and you're like, damn, this guy knows how to play.
Yeah, he's up there. He's at the top. Yeah, and I like that you mentioned that the ladder having more prestige. I feel like these days, the current 1v1 ladder we have now, it has a little bit of impact and you can say prestige a tiny bit, but it's often disregarded because we just have way more tournaments. Back then, ladder was kind of like the main thing to go off as to who is playing well and who is the best in the world. And I want to talk about how secretive the players were. You told me that they didn't actually share the recorded games. Were there little teams forming between pro players where they talk about what the top strategies are? Did they have little cliques like that where they can discuss strategy?
That happened like 2002 or 2003, like a year later, when there was a team from Kazakhstan, L Clan. You maybe heard.
Yeah.
Once that team was formed, then online tournaments start and top players start joining that team and they start discussing a little bit of strategy. But again, it was more like a hobby. It was not that much money, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not full-time. So you're not really practicing. You're more or less playing the meta and maybe you will hide a thing or two, but it's more mechanic things that you hide. It's not a strategy. Strategy was known. You go scrims, that's it.
And why was the strategy so limited? Why were scrims dominating? Why did no one think to maybe, go for like a fast gasto and go straight into knights? Were these strategies thought of or was it just not possible to beat the scrim rushes?
We didn't fall. We basically did not wall at all. And then skirmishes would do so much. Like full walling was not a thing for a very long time. Even the Dark Age Palisade wall, non-existing. Like you're getting forward, for example, and you're still not walling. Like your idea to get rid of the forward is going Will War. So it took time to develop the meta. Again, have to repeat, it was a hobby players. We didn't play that many games. It was casual play. It was most fun. A lot to experience, a lot to learn, and it took time. It took way more time.
Very interesting. Okay, so moving on from that tournament, what was the next major thing for Age of Conquerors at this point?
The next major tournament was actually Arbaleth Cup, and Arbaleth is the founder of the L Clan. He loved the game. He's just like a big fan of the game. He had no interest. It was not like I would do that and have like ads running or whatever. He just did it because he loved the game. And first tournament was online that I recall, the major one. Arbaleth Cup won 2002, and that was won by the Coven. And those games, that's where I started following the pro scene. That was better than any movie. Like waiting for the finals, Coven against Chris. I cannot describe the happiness I had. Like Coven was a very defensive player. Like clean player. And Chris, super aggressive player. Really, really aggressive. Always going forward. And you would think like forward, like 18 pop up. No, it was still 24. It was still 24. Now, the good thing about Chris, he was not limited to go forward. He was the only player that is super aggressive, but can also easily play from home, just like every other player. And it was really hard to beat him.
Wow.
Like I remember that game in the final, Chris actually introduced first time maybe ever full Stonewall.
Ooh.
Like first game, yeah, he just Stonewall everything. Obviously he had a hole and lost the game, but he Stonewall his map and went for the Castle Age Boom Knights. And it was such a crazy game. Like imagine him in the hole and surviving. I think he went like 10 TC boom, just surviving, keeping the game equal until post imp and in the end losing. But it was such an amazing game.
Wow, it definitely captivated you from that point onwards. So Grunt ended up beating Chris in the grand finals, and this is of course Arbalest Cup hosted by L Clan. Who was in L Clan at this point? Because it was, I assume, the best team or like the only good team at the time.
Yeah, that was the only good team. Well, yeah, only let's say professional team. It was just starting, right? I'm not even sure if Chris was in the team at that point. If I recall, it was only Kazakhstan players at that point that were in L Clan. It was like a first tournament. Arbalest just like show up, put $5,000 in the tournament and see how it goes. I believe after the tournament, people start joining, like Chris, Mimox, Capoch, obviously, a lot of top players.
Very interesting.
Okay, during the Arbalest Cup one, there was a new rising player, Helen. He was the cleanest player of the all. Like he was the guy who goes scouts against forward. That was unthinkable, right? And all eyes were on him. He was like dominating the ladder. I think he was 100 point ELO above everybody. Super clean, really good player. And then he lose the first round. Against forward, obviously. But again, it was best of one. It happens. And like people were disappointed. I remember me, like I was like 15, 16 at that point. I was watching a record game. I was like, how did Helen lose? Like, come on, man, focus. Like, how can you lose the first round? It was completely different era. Like best of one was maybe even Somatinov because, well, the skill difference was high. There were like top 10 players and then nobody. But still, he ended up losing in first round against TMD, a unknown player that I think retired after the tournament. Never saw him again, but he put himself in history by beating one of the legends of the game.
Yes, I'm noticing a pattern. The best of one tournaments led to a lot of different upsets. It led to potentially the weaker player winning the tournament or winning the sets. Definitely makes for an exciting viewing of these tournaments, but I can definitely see a little bit of frustration from the players potentially after losing a best of one. I can only imagine, to be honest.
Honestly, I think it didn't exist. Like for me, it wasn't like you lose best of one. Okay, I lost. That's it. I was not like upset by that. Just, well, it happened, right? Maybe because it was more like a hobby and so on, but it wasn't like I want best of 11 or you're not better player than me. It was okay, I lost.
See.
That's it.
So you thinking there's like less ego potentially, or it just maybe mattered less? What was the reason for this?
Probably less ego because, well, it was not esport. It was just, let's say, a smaller prize pool. Well, at the beginning it was not smaller, but for online events it was smaller prize pool. You sign up, you play, you lose. Okay. Honestly, I think ladder was more important than tournaments at that point.
More of the emphasis on the ladder and the ranking system. I mean, I can kind of understand why there'd be less at stake because number one, like as you mentioned, it is a hobby, but also there's no really like live audience. There's no one really watching. So in a way, there's somewhat less pressure on the players to compete and to do well. If they lose, it's not the talk of the community. You're not gonna see it everywhere you go. You lose and you move on with your life, which makes for a bit of a smoother transition.
Exactly. And also, like, thinking from today's perspective, losing best of one on those type of maps, that's just normal. Maps were so unbalanced. Like you could start without Woodland on Arabia, and other guy can have Black Forest. It was like a normal. It was a standard thing.
Yeah, absolutely. The maps were just absolutely horrendous. I still remember those early days where it's just like balance was not a priority, and you get what you get kind of thing. Moving on from the Arbalest Cup, let's of course talk about the next tournament, and I'll also want to touch about the meta. Has the meta shifted at this point at all, or is it still like the same skirm scout kind of all in feudal age that we've been seeing?
It was still skirms, and again, players that forward forced you to go skirms for a very long time. Like when you get forward, even if you want to open stable, you open range because going scouts to defend forward it was unthinkable at that point. Basically unthinkable. Again, there was lag. People were not that good, but skirmishes and two spearmen, you can never deal with that. Not with a stable. And counterattack, you don't have APM. Also, we played on way smaller monitors. We had way bigger resolution, so on the screen all you can see is like 1 TC and 2 farms. That's your that's your vision in front of you on the monitor. So controlling scouts was not that easy. Okay, so the next tournament was Arbalest Cup 2, and it was maybe like, I don't know, 6 months later. And the rising star, the Helen, the clean, stable player that I was looking up for, like he was my idol because I was defensive player. I was like, I want to play like him, right? And that's why I was upset that he lost the Arbalest Cup right away in first round. But Arbalest Cup 2, he ended up winning. And the prize pool was also higher. It was like 10K. We were moving upwards, and he had such a clean play. Like it was super impressive. He beat Grant in the final with quite easily.
Wow. And in this tournament, did Chris participate in? Did he do well?
Chris lost to the Grant in semifinals. He ended up third. He won the third place matchup against Ugnis.
So from what I can see, it's basically Halen, Grunt, and Chris as the top three at this point. Is that correct?
Yes. Like I am Kem. He kind of stopped playing at that point, at least not online events. Also, it could be that he didn't even know the online events existed, right? The information was not out there. Like, you know about your country organizing the World Cyber Games, playing a major LAN event, but those online games, you don't even know where to follow the community, right? Especially for the Asia, it's still not the easiest one, right? The UAE's biggest connection for Chinese players to the rest of the world.
And you mentioned the Age of Empires community. What was the community at that point? Were there like forums that people talk? Like, how do you speak to people if you want to talk to someone internationally about Age of Empires?
Well, that was like the first AV zone. It was called Mr. Fixit Online. That's where people drop record games. That's where people discuss. I would say it's kind of mix of the Reddit and the AV zone. I get that vibe now when I remember. Like, it was recorded games plus discussion. Like, I guess now we don't have recorded games posted because everything was still online during the stream. But back then, you post record game. Okay, is this a good build? Then you post record game of the finals and so on. People discuss. It was a different era. More fun for me, but I'm old.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, like having the recorded games being posted, then you have to go in there and watch it manually yourself, then to get into discussion. It honestly sounds like a lot of fun, albeit a lot of work and a lot more tedious than it is today.
Yeah, but I remember like it was fun reading. It was like way less toxicity because it takes your time. Like you go to the forum, you post, you read, you answer, and so on. People were not like jumping to Twitch. You see Hera lose the villagers to the board and just like, haha, learn to play. It was more like constructive feedback and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like if you're there, you're invested. You can't just be like a troll. Like you can't invest a little amount of time and cause the most damage.
You also have the known community members that post regularly that you will read the good stuff of them. You also have like the topics that played against Chris. You know it will be discussion about the games and so on. It was never like balance changes, for example. It was not like, oh, Hans to good nerf. I lost to the Hans again. This stupid ass game. No, it was like more mature conversations.
More mature, more in-depth. That sounds honestly like I don't think we have a single forum that can achieve that these days. It's always filled with, like you said, the clutter and the complaints. Maybe, like you said, a different era. Moving on from the Arbalest Cup, what was the next big tournament that was coming in? And when did you start stepping up to the table as well and started to compete against those big names?
Next year. But in 2002, we had one more major event, World Cyber Games. That was once per year, Olympics, kind of. Mm-hmm. And we were all waiting for that one. There was a new rising super aggressive player, again from Taiwan. This time, his name was Amken. He was super aggressive. He gave the Amken vibes. And he was there in the finals playing against Helen. So it was like most aggressive player ever against super clean scout defensive player. And we were all thinking like when they meet in the finals, well, Helen will have to play scrims to stop that. There is no other way. No. If I recall the game correct, Helen even had the worst map possible. Like his woodline was not in the same screen. He still open scouts. He played so clean, so chill, like it was a normal ladder game. And he completely demolished him. It was like the most impressive thing I ever saw.
Wow. And then Halen takes another tournament and shows how scouts can be used to defend forward, and obviously plays that clean style despite the heavy aggression from I Am Ken. That's insane. I mean, Halen was now cemented as the number one player at this point?
Yes, Chris was obviously there, but major events were won by Helen. And I think, his style, probably because of strategy, right? Helen learned relay scouts are the way before Chris. Chris was still kind of stuck into that skirmish experiment meta. But a year later, we all start moving towards Helen, right? he was the first one to introduce scouts, and we still live by the scouts.
Wow, and as you can see how the meta actually changed from the tournament games, and it took someone who had to kind of break the meta and not do the same thing that everyone else is doing. And to some extent, we still see the same thing happening today on different maps. There's always one guy that brings a new idea to the table, and then everyone else just kind of copies and tries to like perfect that idea. Of course, Halen, the original Scouts player, shifted the meta from scrims to Scouts. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, 2002, I actually had my first top 8 performance. That year, Helen won. Yeah, I finished top 8.
And that was in what tournament?
It was Alliance Cup, and Helen won that one as well. Yeah, I lost to the French player Pepin, and Chris was there as well, losing to the Mozart. Man, these bring memories. Like Mozart was the guy who first introduced Mayans. Drash FC crossbow.
Wow.
That was like, yeah, that was pioneer. Nobody ever did anything else but Hans, and he did that, and he beat Chris. He lost the next round. He didn't end up winning the tournament. He ended up fourth. Helen obviously won, but yeah, he was the pioneer there in that tournament, doing the different strategy, and that was my first top 8 performance. So not too bad for me.
And how was the Drush FC strategy then compared to now? Was it 3 militia and they didn't mind the 10 gold? Or did they just do 2? Did they do 5? How was the idea behind the Drush?
Good question. If I recall correctly, Drush used to be very long. Like it was 7-8 militia Drush. Now I cannot be 100% certain. I know it was part of the meta at some point, but was it Moser that introduced the long Drush? I think he was. Like a really long Drush, because everybody goes scrums. Drush will, well, buy you so much time and then just go to the castle after. Ooh, the next tournament would be 2003. Lords of the Maps. Arbaleth, well, Legion Clan, Elk Clan tournament. And I finished second. That sounds good now when I read it. Capoch won it. It was again best of one whole tournament, because why not? But if I recall correct, it was not only Arabia. Yeah, it was Arabia, Registered Fortress, and Blind Random.
Ooh, interesting, different maps to the table. And you said Kapach won the tournament, you placing second. Those are the two names, obviously, you, Dowd, and Kapach, that are still around today and still doing work today at the top level. Was Kapach considered a rising star at that point? Was he on the radar, or was that kind of like an upset for him to win the tournament?
He was doing very well on the ladder. He was like, let's say 2.5. It was expecting him to do good. And he was a very aggressive player as well, but he had a different style of aggressive. Like he introduced a different forward play. He was the first one to send 5 villages forward, make a range and a tower. Tower always go to your gold, and those 5 villages take your gold with mining camp. And then instead of skirms, he very fast switched to the archers. So it was kind of a new meta, and obviously that leaves food to start producing scouts from home. It was so good, so hard to stop.
Oh, so he introduced like a forward into a regular game instead of going all out aggression. It was more of like a calculated and smart aggression.
Yeah, exactly. Like thinking ahead, like not only going skirms, obviously has few skirms to establish his position in front of you. Take your goal, go archers, and if you want to counterattack him, stable is always at home. And I believe he was cutting off villager production. He was like mini Huang, no economy upgrades, no nothing, but the amount of units he gets so fast was insane.
Wow, that's actually fascinating. And so Kapach, with that style, takes the the first place. You get the second place. Where were Halen, Grunt, and Chris during the tournament? Did they also play and just got kind of lose out to you guys?
Chris lost to Kapach. Helen, I believe at that point, kind of stopped competing. Yeah, Helen earned a lot of money from those big tournaments, and as I recall, he started doing stocks, right? And he got millionaire. Like he's a genius. What can you do? So
Wow.
he was not playing the tournaments anymore.
I did not
Few
expect
tournaments
that.
later for Kobe, but yeah, he used that money smart.
Wow, that is insane. So he took his winnings and made 10 times the winnings somewhere else. It makes sense.
He invests smart, yeah.
And then the rest of us just stuck playing the game like nothing happened.
And then like I beat him, I earned 300. Let's go! I'm better than you, Helen.
That is so epic. That is so epic. Okay, and I just wanted to ask you something while we have Halen on topic as well here. A lot of people talk about, when they talk about GOAT status, obviously jumping to today, it's pretty clear that Viper is the GOAT at this point. But how do players like Halen, players like you, Kapach, Chris, the players that started at the very beginning of Age of Empires, how are they brought into the GOAT conversation? At least, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, because game lasts for so long, it is hard to. It's like compared to the football, is Pele a GOAT? Like he played different era, probably shorter career as well. Like, imagine if he was still playing today. It's hard. It's hard topic. Like, Helen only played the game for 2 years and made enormous amount of money, right? And moved on with his life, invest something else. And if he was still playing to today, I'm sure he would be top 5 player, but only I'm stuck here.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's obviously a very hard conversation, but it's definitely a question I get a lot. People hear these names, Grunt, Halen, and they're really not sure how strong these players were. So it's really nice to get that insight from you here. Moving on from that tournament, what was the next up on the list of tournaments here?
The next major event was MVP, and guess who won it?
You?
Yes, I won that one. And that was, I think, the first tournament that actually was not best of 1 only. Yeah, it was best of 3 and semifinals, finals, best of 5.
Oh, wow.
Like,
Okay.
Capoch, me, Grant, Ramirez were kind of the top contestants for the first place. And Capoch and me had to meet in semifinal. Oh, and I remember that. Semifinal used to be organized as best of 3. And like few days before it's supposed to happen, admin says it's going to be best of 5. And Capoch was leading 2-0 against me. I end up beating him 3-2.
Wow.
He was super upset by that. It's supposed to be best of 3. Well, sorry, what can I do?
Wow.
Yeah, he was not happy with that.
Last second admin changed, basically changed who won the tournament. That was insane.
Well, that's why I keep saying, like, I'm highly against changing the format during the tournament, even to today, right? Like, first round is best of 5, second best of 7, finals best of 9. Like, by this example, you can see it's completely different tournament. It values different skills as the set grows. I'm highly for, like, Hidden Cup organization, the last Hidden Cup. Best of 7, whole event. Every round is treated the same, and that's how it should be, in my opinion.
I think that's really interesting because that makes it so, like, today in Hidden Cup, the last one's a really good example. If you meet in the finals or if you meet in the first round, whoever is meant to win will win at both rounds. It's not like the finals has more games. So if you meet in the finals versus meeting at the first round, it's going to be a different setting and different atmosphere. I wonder if this will catch on. Of course, there's a lot of things to consider. These days, you want like the finals to be like the most amount of games for the most amount of hype. But I kind of see your point on having only best of 7 or 5 throughout the whole tournament. Kind of keeps that consistency in there.
Yeah, that's definitely how I would prefer, but we need to think about the content as well.
Of course, these days everything does revolve around content for the good and for the bad. And so at this point, it's going to be Capoch, yourself, and Chris, along with Grunt, as like kind of the top 4 from what I've been gathering from these events. How long did that last with you 4 at the top?
Well, at that point, Grant was starting to fall off. He also invest his money smart. he was not gaming so much. He was actually he opened gaming house, but not at today's standard. It was more like internet cafe. He bought the place, 100 PCs, and people pay hourly to use PC, and that's how we used to like connect and play video games with friends. We had quite a few big ones in Serbia. I guess those things don't exist anymore. But Grant invested into that, and I heard he was doing well as well.
Wow. Okay. So they went Age of Empires first, Age of Empires 2 first, and then Businessman second, and that's kind of how they get carried on from there.
Exactly. Like they did not stuck. And also worth mentioning, at that point I was a rising player, and I had kind of unique style, very defensive, a very late pop up. Like I went 25 population up, get 2 rangers and a stable right away.
Oh,
That was my meta. That's what people expected from me. And I always build those buildings next to my wood line. So it kind of gives me a natural protection. And I even did that against expecting people to rush me at like 22 population. I don't know how it worked, but I was managing to stop and I was thinking it's good. Later on, I realized it was not that good. It was just, I was good. Strategy was bad.
yeah. Your strategy, your skills carried you even with a bad strategy. But I guess having something that was unique to yourself definitely gave you a potential edge over other players.
Yeah. Also worth mentioning for that tournament, Grant was using Aztecs the whole event. That was like first time somebody used Aztecs. Like every round he used Aztecs and he like steamroll everybody. Like he beat Ramirez, like top 5 player at that point, 2-0, no problem with Aztecs. And just going like skirmish and spearman, like playing it like it's Byzantines, not using a single Aztec power. And then in finals, I was actually expecting Aztecs, right? He used it whole event. It worked well for him. And he went Hans. I was like, what? But it ended up quite well for me. Think I was in my highest level skill-wise and end up like beating him 3-0. Just saying.
Yeah, of course. The little flex in there peaked out. We know how it goes. I just wanted to ask you, actually, on that note, he used Aztecs throughout the tournament. Was Eagle transition something that he went for in Castle Age? Of course, back then there was no like Eagle Scout into Eagle Warrior. It was just Eagle Warrior in Castle Age. Was that a transition he went for to counter skirms? Is that why he was using Aztecs?
No, just spearman skirmishes. That's it. And most of the games he won early.
Wow,
Like,
in
later on,
Age.
he upgraded pikemen, and that's it. Like, and back then we used rams a lot, right? And in Castle Age, cavalry archers were not that popular. Mostly it was knights. So him going like pikemen and having leftover skirms, he can upgrade to elite. He can never go cavalry archers. It was just like Byzantine play more or less.
Okay, so on that note, why was Byzantine not played so much if that was just the meta skirm spear?
Well, that's a good question actually. I don't know. There was one player from Germany, Fox, who was playing Byzantines every single time with not much success, but I don't see why it was not so much success. He was ahead of his time.
Interesting. Yeah, he went for the right civ. Maybe he was just on the wrong player, right? Maybe it was just the wrong player. And from what I've been gathering, it's like back then you didn't really have that many games played. Nowadays, a new civ comes out, you have like we play 10 games a day with that civ. We find the best strategy within like an hour, within 5 hours. But back then, I guess you were limited in what you could go for and the amount of games you can put in.
It's also like on the ladder, you only play Hans War, and that's all practice you get. That's where you feel most confident, comfortable. Like it's hard to switch. It's really hard to switch.
And why was it only Huns War on the ladder if other civs were being popped up in tournaments?
It was very rarely other tips in tournaments. Like few players were. It was more like StarCraft. Like this player is Zerg, this player is Protoss, and so on. Here, Capoch is Hans player, the trash. I'm Hans player, the play defensive. Spanish player, Olympus POC was Aztecs, actually using Eagles. Fox was Byzantine player, and they never play anything else, right? That's it. You get your civilization, you get your style, and you're that's your identity.
Wow, that is absolutely fascinating. You just go with exactly what you're used to, exactly what you're known for, and you do that every time. That is completely different than what we see today. Being like a flexible player is an absolute must. Back then, one civ, one strat is good enough to get you there.
And you keep doing that, like in tournaments on the ladder. That's it. That's you.
Sick. It's absolutely fascinating.
Okay, the next major event, maybe even the most hyped event, was World Clan League. Again, hosted by Arbut L Clan. That was the first team game tournament, I believe, ever, at least the major one. And there was so much hype around it. I believe it lasted like 6 months as well. It was a really long one, but oh boy, did it deliver.
And how did the team split up at that point?
It was L Clan, like the sponsor and having most of the best players. And for that tournament, there was a old team, Berserker, that got all the legends in the team. It was Cab, Helen, and Grant in the same team. They didn't play for years. They just grew up. They saw like 25,000 prize pool for team game tournament, and they just wanted to play. Probably not even for the prize pool because they were like well settled at that point, but just like a team game tournament, Age of Empires, let's go. And oh boy, they were something else. Like at that point, you realize you're not that good. Like the old players, they knew something else, right? They were dominating the tournament.
So they came back and they dominated the tournament after years of inactivity or a couple years of inactivity.
Exactly. And the tournament was actually a league. It was, I don't know, 12 teams. 12 teams. You play against each team 5 games or 4 games. No, 4 games. And you get a point, right? 1 win, 1 point. I don't think they lost a single time. They lost few games, but they won every matchup and ending up first. Yeah. Actually, for my team, let me see. I was in L Clan at that point, but I think Chris retired. Yeah, it was Capoch, me, and few less known players at this point, like Elkan Too Scared, a Swedish player, Bender, German deathmatch player, but very good team game player as well. Yeah, we were the main players.
And just a question, because a lot of people watching might be interested. Did you guys use voice chat on team games back in the day, or is that something that was like not really around?
No. You just type.
Okay, you just type.
Basically type. That's actually a really interesting thing, like because chat was recorded in record game, right?
Yeah.
And that was maybe the most fun thing to read. You could even like scroll back and read what players were typing before the game started as well. And at that point, you realize people love to read the chat after the game and so on. So as soon as you lose the game, you say GG, and then a rage unleash. Like you resign, record game is over, then you make excuses. That was the meta, like stupid ass map, when nobody can read that you're actually like complaining.
Yeah, see, you get the nice text in public, and then you go, the rage is in the back, no one can see it. Makes sense.
I can't believe I lost to you.
And how big was the team game scene when this tournament dropped? Did it like, were there a lot of people playing team games, or was it just like this was the first team game event, and people practice specifically for this event, as far as pro players go, not casual team games?
Team games did not exist at pro level, I believe. I mean, it was casual, like compared to the Rage Force today. Part of community that enjoy team games, top players only play 1v1. Yeah, this was the first like competitive team game tournament. We didn't know the meta, we didn't know the strategies. It was mostly like pocket goes for the knights, and sides go even skirms. Oh, I was so mad at Capoch now when you recall. Like, it was team game tournament. Obviously, we didn't have experience. And he was like my right arm in that tournament, right? Like top
Yeah.
3 player. And he forward every single time. He plays what he knows, right? And I was pocket, like a defensive player boomer. I was pocket, and he forwards. He received knights in his economy. He was like, "Doubts, what are you doing?" Well, you cannot chase the knights. Like, you don't go forward skirms. Like, there's a limit I can do.
So he went for basically the 1v1 strategy in a team game, and that was what he stuck with.
That's what we know. Like, we played more or less like it was 1v1.
Yeah.
And Pocket was playing knights and mostly booming. Like, it was not scouts. It was just skipping the field age completely.
So interesting. And the pocket, so the meta in team game, like the winning team, what did they go for? Grunt, Halen, and the other two, I forgot what they were. What was the meta that they brought to the table?
Same, just better. Like, meta did not shift. Like, we didn't practice. The tournament practice was not us today. We didn't come up with new strategies for tournaments. It was just the meta, but better execution, right? And obviously Capoch with his own meta going forward. That nobody did that back then either. Freaking Capoch.
Capoch with his own meta costing the team. Okay, after the team game tournament, which was of course won by the legends that came back, what was next up for Age of Empires, and what year are we talking about right now?
That's 2003.
Okay.
That's the two. Yeah, and that year, yeah, Capoch actually won the tournament, S-tier tournament, Lord of the Maps. I was second, so we were top 2 players, right? We were really solid, and yet we couldn't win the World Clan League.
Interesting.
The teams, like, because Capoch playing aggressive, me playing very defensive, the styles didn't work out, right? If I was aggressive pocket as well, would be way better for Capoch. Now, obviously, I'm trolling a little bit. It's not only Capoch's fault. It's like a team composition. Like, we didn't work well together.
Yeah.
You cannot put a very defensive, boomy player in the pocket and very aggressive as a flank. Not going to end up well.
So although you guys were like the 2 1v1 players, put it in a team together, it just the synergy wasn't there, and you guys, couldn't win the team game tournament.
Well, we end up second. It was
Yeah.
not horrible, right?
Which is not too bad still.
Okay, in 2004, it was rise of Chinese community. Iori, not sure if you heard about him, a very aggressive player, and BT4, a very defensive, both Chinese players. In 2004, they end up first and second in the, major event, $700, but major event at that point.
Major event nonetheless. And I can see the price was actually going down, which makes sense because I think the game is at a slight decline as far as the competitive scene at this point.
Yes, the game definitely slowed down. It was during also Age of Mythology release. The game definitely slowed down at that point. And yeah, Iori was the aggressive player that introduced 21 population up forward. That was like, oof, that's fast.
And how did he do
I was
that? How did he go up faster? Did he lure deer? Did he take deer? Like, what was the strategy?
luring
there?
deer? What are you talking about? That came in another life. Like, the uptime was at that point known that you can go up that fast, but still going forward with that uptime gives you very vulnerable economy.
Okay.
My problem was I was still going for my 25 population meta, and I had a bad results against him. For example, the other Chinese player, BT4, he was always beating Iori. I was mostly, let's say, always losing to Iori. And I was always beating BT4. It was kind of a triangle because defensive against defensive, I was having the edge against everybody else. But against forwards such as strong as Iori or Capoch or Chris, I could still lose. Okay, the next event right after the Simply the Best was another World Clan League, a slightly smaller prize pool, 11K. And again, the old legends formed. Oh, this is the biggest drama tournament, I just realized.
Oh, what's up?
This is a juicy stuff. I was banned.
From the tournament?
Oh, yes.
Do you want to tell us why?
Yes. For the World Clan League, after the first tournament, let's say disaster, we finished second. For me, anything but first was unacceptable, obviously. I was a different person. I was competitive. And I wanted to invite my friend that I practice a lot with, Ramirez, a really good player that we, play every day on the ladder. It's like, for example, you and Leary. And I invite him to the team. My team didn't want him. and I didn't want to play again with the same team for the next World Clan League. Like it didn't work out, right?
Yeah.
So I decided to leave the team. And joined a different team with my friend Ramirez, and the whole team got banned. They accuse us for playing for money.
And you're not allowed to
Like-
play for money?
Well, it was a different era, right? It was a hobby player and so on. Like we are getting paid to play. It was ruining the sportsmanship or purpose of competition. I don't know. It was it was the first big drama of Age of Empires.
And so they banned you from the entire event, and you just weren't able to play. Was there like any talk of the community at this point? Because like you're banning the basically number one, which is you, from playing a tournament. I can assume this is a pretty heavy decision.
Yeah, it was like 20 pages or so on. Like, but the decision was final. It was, well, one guy pulling the strings. He's a sponsor. He
Mhm.
didn't like me leaving. That was obviously like he put so much money. I played so many of his events and so on. And then I kind of betrayed him. I understand his point of view. I was young and I jumped into it too fast. Like I should first contact him and so on.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
for me. It was like, you don't want my friend? Okay, I'm out. I made the decision in like 5 minutes. I didn't realize like there's other side who invests and who wants me in the team. He wants best for his team that he invests like thousands and thousands of dollars, and now his best player is leaving him for I guess more money. From his perspective, I understand it, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't approach him. I just did what I wanted, right? If I could change the time, I would probably still do the same, but I would first like contact him, say, hey, I want to play with my friend. We are practicing a lot. We will do good in the event and so on. I appreciate everything you've done, but I'm a competitive player and so on. But I just left, and he got mad.
Yeah, I can definitely relate with that decision because, of course, at that point your mind was just on winning the tournament. You didn't really consider too much of like the business behind it or like the interest of the other people involved. You kind of just wanted to focus on winning, which I can definitely understand and relate to because at the end of the day, competitive gaming, it kind of like sucks you in there. And so in the end, you did team up with Ramirez, and you obviously got banned. Who ended up winning this tournament?
The BSK again, the Cab, Helen, Grant, and Coven. Like the old legends formed the team again and ended up beating the Legion clan.
And Cab,
And the funny thing,
was he a player that was at the same level as them? Because I know Cab played with you guys in Tyrant, and of course we're skipping ahead there. But was he also the same level as Halen and Grant, or was he a tier lower?
execution wise, he was tier lower for sure, maybe even 2. But Cab was the first one who started kind of introducing a meta shift, like thinking, making strategies, preparing for tournaments. So he was always investigating. He was there to practice. He was like, okay, we now play AM. Let's see what AM likes to do. Leader likes archers. He got this timing at 9 minutes. He would have 2 archers at your woodline. He did his homework, right?
Yeah.
And he shared his info with other best players, and then they're dominating. So he was like maybe the most important part of the team.
Interesting. He was a strategist. He was a guy that prepared. He brought a whole different dynamic to the tournaments that just was not there at the time.
Yeah, he started preparing for tournaments. Yeah, that's actually the perfect way to put it.
Perfect.
Cab was introducing tournament preparation. Before that, I think tournament preparation did not exist even. Okay, so in 2005, there was a new organization, Global Gaming League. They were making tournaments for a lot of games, and they include Age of Empires 2. That was a huge news, and they put quite a decent prize pool as well. It was 8K for Age of Empires 2, and like it was at this point it was only Arbaleth, and that's it. Like we depend on one personal sponsor that is like multimillionaire, and now we kind of have a professional, first time a professional organization, esport organization, showing the interest in AoE2, but also in Age of Empires, Age of Mythology, and that was quite a massive news. First time ever we have an esports sponsor, and it was kind of sus a little bit. Like we didn't see ourselves worthy. Like why would anybody want to host this? The game was not popular. I believe we still watch recorded games. Like there was no way to spec the games. You need to co-op to spec the games. But in the end, it was legit. We got a prize pool, and they keep doing a few more tournaments until they step away from the whole project, not only Age of Empires 2.
So this is a huge step. This is basically like the equivalent of Red Bull coming in to invest into Age of Empires 2. Did this kind of revive the pro scene a little bit for like 1v1 Age of Empires, or is this like a big deal amongst the pro community?
Yes, it's similar to Red Bull, obviously on a way smaller scale, but it was a big news. Like until that point, it was only L-Clan tournaments. And L-Clan tournaments were sometimes public, but very often only for L-Clan players. And
Right.
now we have something outside. Like now, imagine like GL is the only professional team in Age of Empires now. Imagine if every tournament they make is only for GL players. Would feel awkward, right?
Absolutely.
And then suddenly we have somebody else. Now we get Red Bull, and then it's all okay.
Now
Now we
everyone can
have
play all of a
something for
sudden.
outside.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Obviously, very needed for the esports scene to thrive.
Especially for me because I was banned from L Clan tournaments at that point.
True. Banned from L-Clan tournaments, so finally allowed to play.
Finally.
Were you extra motivated going into this tournament?
Yes, I was, but I finished second. Chris finished first, and Chris kind of rejoined. He stopped playing at around 2003, and after I got banned, L Clan kind of contacted him. Do you want like to go back to the game? Help us win the World Clan League 2, and he got back to the game, and he was doing really good. He's a talented player, right?
Yeah.
And the next big tournament was 2005, the Global League, as he said, and he won that one. I finished second.
And so the rivalry between you and Chris was basically at its highest point around 2005. Were you guys continuously from now on to be the best two players?
Yeah, I think from 2005 we were mostly finishing first, second, and so on. But the rivalry was not that high as people think between us. We were actually friends. We were maybe the only players that exchanged strategies here and there. After the game, I should offend that. Oh yeah, that's good, that's bad. We were like learning from each other on very friendly matter.
Oh wow, okay, yeah, you don't hear about that at all because when talk about Chris and you Doubt it comes up these days, we only remember that you guys were going head to head with each other. We don't kind of get like the behind the scenes of how the relationship was. So it was good terms, friendly terms at the highest level, of course, first and second, but definitely still exchanging strategies. That's definitely nice to hear. Always like friendly competition, but still at the highest level, which is nice.
Yeah, that kind of changed a bit later. We will get to there.
Of course.
But that did change. Well, after the Global Gaming League, the next tournament was World Clan League, the team game tournament again. And I was still banned, so I was not able to play. But I think that was the only tournament L Clan actually won.
And what was the L Clan team winning this one?
It was Capoch, Chris, Bender, Too Scared. Yeah, those were the main players, I would believe, yeah.
And they beat out the team with Grunt and Halen?
Yes, but also they were not in the finals. There was a new rising Chinese team with Iori and BT4, and I think Paladin was, maybe you know him, he was kind of fresh. Yeah, was part of that team as well. Now Chinese community started growing. They were really good. And there was a small drama there. Oh yes, there was a drama there, now I recall. It was a double elimination. The tournament took ages, and playing against Chinese team, it was so laggy at that point. It was unplayable. And in winner brackets, the Miss clan, the Chinese clan, beat L Clan, and then it was supposed to be played grand finals. The loser needs to win twice, right?
Yeah,
1 to send. Yeah, and they decide it's only one set.
Ooh.
So L Clan won the grand finals, but they only won once, right?
Yeah.
The winner bracket finals basically didn't count, and there was a big drama around that.
Yeah,
but the reason they did that, it was not like to create the edge for them. It was just unplayable. Like it was a long, like you would literally take 10 hours to finish the set.
Yeah, so they literally just couldn't play 2 sets on that lag. So they jumped it down to 1. L Clan wins, and in the end, it was basically 1 point for L Clan and 1 point for the Chinese team, if you count the double elimination factor.
Exactly.
A lot of last-minute changes on the rules, it seems, back then.
Well, we were not so professional. We were more hobby players still.
Yeah.
Okay, the next big event was still in 2005, $4,000 tournament, America Cup, and that introduced one new Polish player, Peel. He was very talented, very micro-oriented player, who was usually doing very good against me, maybe because of the micro, but this time I did beat him. And also, here's the GM Jack. He's still playing, he's still around. He was in semifinals. That's nice to see.
Yeah, Jack.
Those things bring memories.
Jack is still like a 2K3, 2K4 player till today. So he was basically a semifinal finisher back in 2005 as well. It's nice to see the Polish community rise up with a couple stars there.
Yeah, they hit really good, strong Polish team at that point. And Peel was their leading player. A good friend of mine. I think we did end up teaming up later on in tournaments. Oh, and then at the end of 2005, there was a tournament called Back to Almaty, again from the L Clan. Was supposed to be played. That was supposed to be like qualification to get to the main event into Almaty, Kazakhstan City, where it would be a live event with the sponsor and everything. And main thing about that event was my ban was lifted. I was able to compete and play again.
Okay, so you came back in, and how did the tournament go?
I lost. That tournament I lost to the rookie. Again, a span. Man, there is so many players. Like, it's hard to keep up that I need to introduce. The rookie was a Spanish player, similar to Tato. Maybe something was Spanish water, whatever, but he was not a meta player. He was a meta killer.
Yeah.
He did not play the skirmishes, scouts. He could play, but on slightly lower level. He would lame a lot. He would do weird strategies. He would boom. He would fast castle. You couldn't know what to expect from him.
And what was the laming back then? How was the laming being done?
It's just you need to accept that your scout will go home with like 5 HP. You cannot get 2 hits. You will get 3 hits at least because of the lag.
Okay.
But it was possible at that point.
And
at that point, we learned about the game.
Yeah, and at that point, was that the first time laming was really seen in pro play, or was he just the guy who did it the most?
He's the guy who did it the most, for sure. We didn't see it very often. But at 2009, speaking of the laming, in a tournament Master of the Hands, there was one new player that was like 2.2, 2.3 rating. Nothing too impressive, but he lamed every single game. Every single game, he takes your board, no matter what. And there was a huge drama around that. People were thinking he's map hacking. He was very, very close to get banned from the tournament.
Wow.
He even beat Chris in qualification, like 3-2, getting Chris out. That was like how? Like a new player beating Chris out of 5 games, he lame every single time. That cannot be a thing, right? You cannot find the board every single time. And he actually made a post explaining how he does it. Like, he was ahead of his time. At that point, I was thinking he's a cheater. At today's standard, like, it's easy to find the board, right?
Yeah. Of course. But it's really interesting to see someone using a mechanic like laming and kind of seeing that it's strong and abusing it every game to beat players ahead of their skill level. I think that's a really nice aspect of Age of Empires, where it's just like, you can always bring something new to the table, at least back then.
Yeah, it's crazy. And when you get something new like that and beat a player like Chris, who is already like competing for 5-6 years at top level, people start excusing, right? He has to be cheating. Like, how can you lame every single time? Like, it's impossible. And I remember he lost the next round against Zupi, and people were happy. Like, admins especially, because they didn't need to take decision, right? If he beats Zupi, gets to the main event, start winning there, like, what do we do? Admins were happy he lost.
Okay. So we jumped ahead to 2009, but back to 2006 now. This is around the time where Zone kind of started dying off. Is this correct?
Yes, I believe Microsoft Zone shut down in 2006.
Okay.
And that was the darkest period of Age of Empires. Then we had to find a way to play. There was Game Park, Game Ranger, I believe, Hamachi, IP right away. Now imagine giving your IP to random player, guy on the internet, just to play with him. The cheating was out of this world. It was really tough. I believe 3 years or so until Voobly pop out.
And were there any tournaments during this time, or was the game just completely dead?
There were, I think, 1 tournament per year. It's hard because I don't recall them playing on a weird platform, but I believe we did, right? There is no other way.
Yeah.
Now when I'm looking to the calendar, we played those tournaments, and Zone definitely didn't exist at that point.
So you guys used...
It's hard to know exact date, right?
Of course.
It's been a while.
Yeah. So like information is of course limited. So the dates are being approximated at this point. So tournaments still happened from 2006 to 2009, but there's really not much information and not much. It was not the official platform that it was played on.
Yeah, and you can see that it was like 1 tournament per year. So
okay.
I'm quite confident it was like from 2006-7 to 2010 that we got the Voobly and we got tournaments back.
Okay, so jumping ahead to 2010, and of course, that period marks the darkest time for Age of Empires. No official online platform to play on. You can assume that most casual players just stuck to single player. If you wanted to play online, you had to obviously know the secondary platforms, all of which just weren't good options, as Dout mentioned. And it's the kind of thing where the game kind of goes back into like a single player and goes into hibernation. I've actually been in an era where the game was kind of dead as well. So I know a little bit about that, where the game kind of just stagnates for a little bit, 1 tournament a year. But the big revival that came in around 2009, 2010, that really brought Age of Empires 2 online gameplay back to the table was, of course, Voobly. It was a second-hand platform, I guess you can say, an unofficial platform to play Age of Empires 2 online. They had other games as well that you can play on, and it was the unofficial platform to play Age of Empires 2 online, like how it was played in the Zone. How was the early days of Voobly, Dow? Tell us a little bit about that platform, because it is probably one of the most important moments of Age of Empires 2 career.
Voobly was actually the best thing that happened to Age of Empires. I think Voobly doesn't get enough recognition, but they did to the game. If there was no Voobly, I'm quite sure we wouldn't have we would not be. I would not know you. That's how Voobly was
That's
important.
crazy.
You would be like guy who I never heard of. The Voobly bring community back. It was way better than any platform we could play on. It introduced user patch, but first also introduced the widescreen. Oof, I remember that
Ooh.
option. I was against that for some reason, and that was kind of rise of Jordan and Viper who were using it. And I don't know. In my head, it was cheating. Like, to explain what it is, it stretched the screen so more things can fit on the screen. Before you could see, like, on the one screen you could see town center and a castle. That's maximum. Now you can see like 6 castles on the screen, one screen, and it was quite massive, right?
That's
Now
a
you can
huge
micro way
difference, yeah.
easier.
It's basically zooming out, like the modern day zooming out.
Yeah, exactly. It was. That's why people ask me why do you still play so zoomed in. Well, even this is zoomed out for me, but that was a massive thing, and they were constantly working with the quality of life features. We got multi-queue, we got lag improvements, pathfinding. Like Wobbly, maybe even to today, is the best platform to play with Emperors.
Yeah, as far as pathing goes, like Voobly, even till today, for those who don't know, Voobly is still active with Age of Empires. I actually just checked; they have an average of like 400 to 500 people, maybe up to 1,000 people playing daily. So they have a decent player base there, and they have the definitive edition civs even till now. It's just that the graphics are still the same as like the old school Age of Empires 2 graphics. So the graphics are a little bit crusty. They don't have the same like features and look as the definitive edition. But Voobly is still till today a solid platform to play Age of Empires 2, and maybe like the second best after the official one.
Yeah, Wobbly needs to get more credit. Not sure if they got anything out of that, but damn, they did a good job.
And Voobly at the time, you know, when the players kind of heard about Voobly coming in, did all the players migrate there right away? Did you, Chris, Kapoch, all like the legends of the time, did you guys right away start playing on Voobly?
Yes, for sure. Like, of course, at the beginning you were a bit skeptical because we went for a game park where you could cheat and so on. Now we heard about new platform. It was obviously, by the look of it, it was so similar to the Microsoft Zone. The same system to get to the lobby, the same game mechanics to host the games and so on. It was so familiar. The ladder, the pings, it was what we had on Microsoft Zone, and it was like the best looking from all those previous one. Now, question was, will we have the same experience with cheating and map hacking as before? I believe it was a bit rough at the beginning, but they were really good at patching and fixing the cheaters and the problems. Like the patches was constant. We were actually having updates in the game for once. It was good.
Wow, updates coming in. And what were some of the updates that came in during the Voobly era?
It was called user patch, right?
Right.
Now, what exactly it did, I'm maybe not the right person to ask.
Right.
But the user patch, it's still like the best thing ever happened to the Age of Empires. Sadly, I don't even know what it is.
As far as I know, it's basically just an update to the game that fixes pathing, fixes, you know, all these little things that the game, you know, might not have had perfect when it first came out. So it's basically just upgrading the game, which is the first time that this has happened since it released in 2000. So 10 years later, it's now a little bit of an Age of Empires 2 revival, as far as I know. And I want to talk to you about something that I'm sure the people watching are very curious about. In the Voobly launch of 2010, you know, maybe a couple years after, did we start seeing the rise of new players, specifically the rise of, you know, guys like Viper and Jordan, which are basically the modern day pro players? Is this when they started playing?
I think they start more around 2011, 12. First, around 2010, it was Riot. Yeah, the Brazilian player, the new hope, like a super fast micro-oriented player, like similar to the Leary, like perfect mechanics, good micro, a little bit weaker as game goes on, but like a clean player, very clean player, meta player, Leary. Riot was Leary, and he did start playing his main event in 2010. Yeah.
And was he competing against the household names like you, Chris, and Kapoch?
Yes, in 2010 we played the first tournament, Master of Hands. And I beat him in the finals.
Okay, so Ryu basically jumped right up there to compete against the best players at the time.
Yeah, he was the new. He was like suddenly very good player.
And did he
very talented, very good.
Did he only play on Voobly? Did he not play on like Zone at all or other platforms?
I assume he did, but probably more casually with friends and so on.
Yeah,
I believe on Voobly he just like start getting into the game and getting on a very high level very fast.
Yeah, it's super impressive. Ryut, of course, someone who stayed dominating the game on Voobly for a good 8 years, I would say, around the top 5 consistently. Some people even said he was challenging Viper for the first place a couple times as well. I'm sure we'll get to that, but definitely a household name at this point.
Yeah, and also worth to mention, around 2009, the Brain Champion Cup, that was the first time, at least for me, and I think for the whole community, that preparing for tournament got on another level. Like Cap was helping me prepare for tournaments. Before that, you have a tournament game, you schedule, you play the meta, and that's it. Now it was a bit different. Like Cap was analyzing my opponents, he was giving me the info, we practiced together off record, right? Nobody sees that. And then I jump into the tournament and, well, play with very high preparation and info. Some prepared strategies like, I don't know, Byzantines going fast castle canvas and so on. Never seen before, at least not in my eyes. And yeah, I need to give credit to Cap. He was the first one lifting the game to more professional level with forcing players to practice. And because I started practicing off stream, I believe others has to do as well.
Yeah, you guys basically introduced like tournament preparation and the strategy element to the game, which was it took the game from more of like an execution plus style based to now a bit more like kind of complete. You got to think about it. You got to bring something new to the table, and the opponent has to now adapt to these new things being thrown at them.
Yeah, exactly. It was like before you have your own style, enemy expect, and now Cap was like, okay, he will do that. We know he will do that. Let's do the counter, and that leave the game to another level.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. So that was in 2009, and then going into the first big tournaments of 2010 onwards. Were you still the number 1 guy?
Ryut and me were fighting for number 1. Like this is probably a good thing to say. For the Master of Hans, the finals, Cap and me prepared a brand new strategy, never seen before. Hans war, obviously, but Josh into fast castle cavalry archers.
Ooh,
That was like first time ever spotted. We cooked it together, and Ryut, who was favorite, a better player, skill-wise for sure against me, I completely demolished him in finals. He had no chance. Like, it was crazy. Like, then suddenly cavalry archers became way more popular.
wow. And so, okay, let's talk a little bit. So before that strategy was made by you and Cab, was the meta still in the skirmisher plus scout into knight kind of style?
Meta was more around scouts at that point.
Okay.
The rushing meta started slowing down, especially with Voobly. Like we had user patch, less lag, and so on. So scouts start rising. It was more like going scouts and maybe reacting with skirmishers if you need. But scout was meta and less walls. So way more scout, longer feudal age, and the most important thing was good timing on the bloodlines.
Yeah, getting bloodlines was popular in feudal age at the time, right?
Yeah, you need to good time. I guess I need to mention that to you as well. Good timing on the bloodlines, getting that gold at the perfect time to get bloodlines, and then going for the main fight against scouts was just the most important thing. And then enemy sees the bloodlines, he needs to run away. You get momentum and so on. It was all around the bloodlines at that point.
Yeah, and more around the scouts and I guess into like cav archers / knights and castle age. Breaking the meta with Drush FC into straight cav archers is the most Hun war thing possible, because of course the cav archers back then were even cheaper for the Huns than they are now. They got I think a 15% or 20% in castle age, and I think a 30% in imp, something crazy like that. As far as this guy, I don't know if you remember the exact numbers, Doubt.
Don't know the exact numbers even now, but yeah, they were slightly cheaper.
Yeah, definitely just a great option for the Huns.
At 2003, actually, a Chinese player, Windy, I think he was the first one to introduce cavalry archers at very high level. Like before that, it was mostly knights, and Windy was a player that only played, I think, that tournament and never again. And he had more walling and booming approach and full cavalry archers. That's it. Obviously, now maybe not the prettiest thing to say, but he was from China, and the lag was a massive thing playing from rest of the world to China, and the range units get to extra power at that point. That's what I was thinking. It's still partly true, but definitely cavalry archers are an amazing unit, and he was the first one to realize that. Also, what was really good about Windy, he had very precise play with cavalry archers. For example, if he's going up to Imperial Age, he would not make a single cavalry archer until he gets imp when they're cheaper. He would prepare like 10, 20 ranges and then start massing them. He was like really addicted to cavalry archers and using them on the highest micro level as well at that point.
At a similar point to the Voobly launch, shortly after it, StarCraft 2 was now released, which is, of course, the follow-up to StarCraft 1 Brood War. And StarCraft 1 was, of course, a massive hit. StarCraft 2 now being released could potentially have impacted some of the Age of Empires 2 players, most notably Doubt, who actually took some interest in StarCraft 2. How is the impact of StarCraft 2 being released for you, Doubt, as a player, and for the Age of Empires 2 scene at around 2010?
Well, StarCraft 2 was the main RTS game at that point. RTS genre, well, as it is today as well, is not the most popular. And StarCraft 2, well, had a huge legacy from StarCraft 1. So every RTS gamer jumped into that game, including me, including Kapoj, and I guess many more Age of Empires 2 players. But obviously, we didn't all have success there. I don't think any Age of Empires 2 player had a massive success there. I was quite decent. I was like Grandmaster. Kapoj was even competing, I believe, for the South American tournaments. But in the end, we all come back to Age of Empires 2. 1 year after StarCraft was released, a new tournament for Age of Empires was announced, a World Clan League 7. And I was now still in StarCraft 2 and so were many other players. Then Cab approached me and asked me to play the tournament with him and the old legends, Helen and Grant. I couldn't refuse that, right?
Of course.
So at that point, I just ditched StarCraft 2 and started playing Age of Empires 2. And from that point on, I think I was full-time, more or less.
So now this marks the beginning of you being a full-time player in Age of Empires 2. No more StarCraft, and you're now treating it like it's a job?
Not the first edition. That was like the first World Clan League was hosted by the Tyrant sponsor, but he only gave the 5K, do whatever you want. He was not really so much into community and so on. He just wanted to see the games, team games. But after that, he loved the game, loved the games. And yeah, that was kind of me being part of the team, getting some sponsorship and so on, marked me as a full-time player. Well, World Clan League 7 was like a new rising players, similar to AM. This time it was called RVK. And the players lineup: Dogao, Jordan, Riot, and Viper. Quite a solid lineup for that point.
Those are the names we still see around today, actually. That's so super interesting.
Yeah. At that point, they were like rising players. They formed a team, like a superpower team, let's say like I am. And the old legends, Cab, Grant, Helen, and myself. Those were the two main competitors for that tournament. And we end up playing finals. I think that was the most hyped finals ever, at least for my eyes. Like, Grant absolutely had no interest into playing. He just showed up for the tournament, never practiced. Cap was super motivated for the practice, and Helen was super talented. He always, like, in practice, he's like so. In tournament, absolutely beast. And me at that point, like, as I would say, a number one player still, but Jordan, Riot, and Viper right there. Like, we're more or less same level.
I don't think
So
people
you would
realize
assume
how insane that is as well. Like, we had Halen and Grunt that we spoke about them in the 2001 to 2004 era. To see them come back with you, who started in 2004, 2005, or maybe 2003, and of course Cab, all together in one team, like the old legends versus the newly formed team. I think that I can't even understand. I'm excited just thinking about it. I can't even understand the hype that must have been taking place at the time.
it's like 10 years later, right? they just like team games, right?
Yeah.
And it was mostly Cap pushing it. Cap was really interested into that tournament, and he grouped us all together. We were both of those teams were kind of dominating group stage. And then it was time for the finals. And finals, oh boy, were they favorite. They were way better skill-wise, way better prepared. But like a week before tournament, Cab and me show up. We start cooking some strategies. We prepare every single map. And I think we beat them like fair and square, like 4-2 or 5-2, something like that. Like, nobody, like, we didn't expect that. Like, like Grant and Helen were really good, talented players, but they did not play, right?
Of course.
Viper, Jordan, Rio, Dugao were grinding the ladder 24/7, and I was as well. But the rest of the team, not so much. So we were expecting to like get demolished, but just shows up how much Cap preparation is important. Like, he put preparation back in the tournaments. Like, you have way better, way more active, way younger players, still losing to the way slower, older players with less skills, just because of the preparation.
And that's honestly the beauty of Age of Empires, because it shows that at the end of the day, no matter how good you are execution-wise, I think strategy just remains to be king. And the further we go down the line of history, the more strategy plays a bigger role, I feel, just because knowing what to do and knowing what the game plan is, I think that just has such an impactful role in tournament matches. And so this one was a 4v4 and now like a best of 7 finals, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, interesting. So like the team of legends takes the win. How was the atmosphere around the community at that point?
Split, right? All the players were kind of cheering for Tyrant. The new generation, like, let's go Viper, let's go Jordan. Like, Viper was still the lesser player in that team. He was, I think, benched most of the time. He was rising and soon surpassed them all. But at that point, he was, like, at the beginning of the tournament, he was probably the weakest in the team. By the end of the tournament, he was the best player in the world.
Wow.
But yeah, he was still benched. So lucky us.
Wow, super interesting. So that marked kind of like that tournament was kind of like around the area where Viper was the rising star. And after that tournament, you did mention Viper became the best player in the world. How did he prove that? Was it just on the ranked ladder, or was it in tournaments as well?
Think it was mostly ladder. I don't see a lot of tournaments happening there, at least not S tier. But on the ladder, he was dominating. Yeah, on the ladder, he was different kind of the beast. I remember, like, when I played him on the ladder, after some time, that's it. I knew he'll be like gold soon enough.
Why did you know that? What was it about his playstyle?
Like I was saying earlier, how Helen, Grant, and other players had a super clean play. Viper clean was on another level, and he was not limited. He could do aggressive, defensive, meme strategies. Everything he does is really good. Micro on another level for that point. Like if that was even before quick walls. Like he invented quick walls. Like you could see the potential. I remember even beating him in some games, but I knew he's a better player, and he will prove that soon enough.
Wow, fascinating. In 2011, there weren't many tournaments, like especially S tier 1v1 tournaments, to determine who was the #1 player and who was the best player in the world. So to work around this, Chris decided to challenge Doubt in a best of 21, just between them two, to determine who is the best player in the world. Currently, they were the two best at the time, and so this challenge made a lot of sense. Doubt ended up winning the challenge, and he kind of had a landslide victory, 11 for Doubt and only 5 for Chris, cementing Doubt as the #1 player in 2011, quite clearly in the eyes of the community.
After I played against Chris, a year passed, and Jordan and Viper start rising on the ladder. Like, Jordan was #1, I was #2, Viper was #3 on the ladder. Ladder was important that day. And the sponsor of the Tyrant decide to see who is the #1 between, well, #1 on the ladder and #2, which was me, and organize best of 21 between me and Jordan.
In this best of 21, Doubt yet again takes it 11-8. So Doubt with 11, Jordan with 8. So although Jordan did a little bit better than Chris, Doubt still cements himself as the #1 player and takes home a whopping prize pool of $5,000. And believe it or not, it was a best of 21, winner takes all. The Tyrant sponsor put down $5,000, and Doubt walked away with $5,000, and Jordan unfortunately walked away with nothing. But such were the times of Age of Empires 2, where if you were at the top, life was good, and if you weren't, then it's hard work ahead of you.
During a best of 21, Jordan against Doubt, against me, we were both practicing with Viper, our teammate and the technically third best player at that point. And during our practice with Viper, we were spamming him the games. Viper surpassed us both. It was crazy. Like at the beginning of the practice, Viper and me were kind of equal. Same Jordan told me after, he was equal as well. But by the end of our best of 21, Viper was beating us both convincingly every single time. It was crazy, and we were fighting for #1 spot.
So Viper in the shadows actually became basically the unspoken #1 during that period.
Best of 21, like, push Viper above the limit to become the best player. And he was not part of it. He was just a practice partner. The next tournament would be the Tribal Wars. That's a team game tournament hosted by the Tyrant sponsor on the Nomad, Land Nomad, the most popular team game map at that point. Like, Land Nomad is what Rage Forest is today. Every team game, casual team game, was played on Land Nomad. And obviously sponsor loved that map, played it a lot casually, as with us as well. And he decided to make like 15k tournament on that. But at that point, Grant and Helen had zero interest. So we had to look up for the new names. And guess who joined the Tyrant?
I think it was you, right?
Well, I was in the Tyrant already.
I see.
It was Jordan and Viper joining Tyrant with. So the Tyrant team was Cap, Jordan, Viper, and myself. Like the last World Clan League 7 was the last time we will see from the Helen and Grant, sadly.
Wow. Okay. So they came back, they won a tournament, and then they left
Yes.
and never to be seen again.
Yeah, actually, it's crazy.
That's actually one way to go out, to be honest. That is such a story. And this is the Tyrant team now. So you, So it's Doubt, Viper, Jordan, Cab, and is there another player missing?
No, it was only us for
Those four.
a few more years. Yeah,
That was the Tyrant
that
team.
joined a bit later.
Okay, that was the Tyrant team that I remember when I first came to the scene. That's the Tyrant team that I saw. That's the Tyrant team to look up to, and those are basically the best players in the world. Did it stay like that for a long time?
Yes, the Tyrant team was maybe the most dominant team in the history of Age of Empires, because we had the Viper and Jordan that were on another level, and me being there like top 5 player, low interest at that point. While I got a bit older, I was not so much competitive anymore. I was like, okay, you guys take first place, I'll be third. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, they're at that point, they're like the young guys, and you're kind of, you know, you've already been playing for maybe like 5, 6, 7 years at the highest level.
13.
13 at that point.
Yeah.
At around 2013, while all of these tournaments were happening on Voobly, there was actually a really important new Microsoft launch, which was actually the Age of Empires 2 HD edition, which is now an official Microsoft launch through the platform of Steam and not through Voobly, where people can play Age of Empires 2. They added in new civilizations and, you know, kind of gave the game a new look. And this is where a lot of new players and maybe older players that played in single player kind of were able to play again online on a legit platform on Age of Empires 2 HD. But something very interesting happened. Because on HD, they actually played on a game version that is 1.5 times regular speed or normal time. The actual game on Voobly was played at 1.7 speed instead of 1.5. And so the Age of Empires 2 HD edition was not really considered a very competitive version of the game and more or less a casual version. So upon release of AOE2 HD, although it brought in a lot of casual players, no doubt, it didn't really shake the competitive scene up too much, and they continued to stay playing on Voobly. And on Voobly at this point, they basically played on the Age of Conquerors patch and not any of the newer civilizations. Definitely worth a mention while we cover the history of Age of Empires.
Yeah, for sure. But like you said, HD didn't rise so much as competitive platform to play because, well, it was 1.5 speed. And I believe user patch, pathfinding, Wobbly was just the better place to play. But it did obviously got a lot of old and new audience back to the game, because buying the game over the Steam is smooth, it's easy, it's what people know. Getting the game to the Wobbly, getting third program to play the game, sounds a bit shady, right?
Yeah.
Only hardcore fans can get there.
100%, 100%. The launch of HD Edition was actually based on the Forgotten Empires expansion, which was, as far as I know, a hobby expansion created by the community, most notably the member named Cision, who still plays a really big role and is involved with Forgotten Empires, who have since risen to a very high standing for Age of Empires 2, the game as a whole. But back then, it started off as a hobby project, making different expansions and new civilizations for the game. And Microsoft launched HD and made the Forgotten Empires expansion with those new civilizations an official integration to Age of Empires 2, and had a completely new game launched through Steam with those new civilizations. So as you can see, community members have been basically carrying this game, and Microsoft taking the best ideas and the best creations from the community and implementing them into an official game on an official platform. This was a huge step forward for the game because, of course, until now, there hasn't been a single new civilization since the Conquerors in 2000, and of course, not a whole lot of patches have been made since then. So the launch of a brand new game with new civilizations was a massive deal for the Age of Empires 2 community. Also, just a little fun fact, I started playing around 2012, 2013, and so from this point onwards, I actually do remember a few things as soon as I started playing, and I, obviously got in right away and started playing Huns War, started playing, all of these, games that I saw being played by the pros. I looked up to guys like Doubt, Chris, Viper, Slam, even household top player names. And it was around this point where I really started grinding and climbing the ladder at the, the high level. However, I only played high level in ladder. I never made a single splash in any pro tournament, except one of the Nations Cup that we'll cover in a little bit. Not the first one in 2014, the second one in 2016. But aside from that, I didn't make a single splash on competitive scene in 1v1s at all. But it was definitely still nice to, experience the Hun Wars at that era.
In 2013, Viper and me organized our own best of 21, where Viper was already clearly number one, and he demolished me. That it was kind of clear winner before it started. He beat me 11-4. It was not breaking a sweat for him. He cemented himself there as the number one player in the world.
And so as you can see, between 2012 and 2013, we basically saw the passing of the torch from Doubt being the number one to Viper being the number one in 2013. And Viper would go on for several years to be the dominant number one. And years later, many people will still consider him the GOAT. And we'll take a look at some of his accomplishments in these years to see what exactly gave him that reputation. But 2013 marked the passing from Doubt to Viper, and that is a very significant moment in Age of Empires 2 history. Of course, Doubt didn't fall completely to the bottom. He was still right behind Viper as number two, but it's very clear that the young guys at the time were catching up and surpassing him in the game. So Doubt, let me ask you, with such a landslide victory from Viper in such a short period of time, what did Viper bring to the table that was so different? What prevented you from keeping up and, losing with such a big result when you were considered the best player just a year earlier?
Viper introduced mostly the very clean and safe play. Like, even now it's a meme. If you see a hill, Viper builds a castle. That's it. That's how he started playing. He was always very patient, very pragmatic about his games. Not going too fast, taking the kills, banking always the gold. He always gets 5k gold in post team and pushing the victory slow. That's a new thing that I think Hera perfected after.
Okay, so a shift in playing more carefully and more strategically from Viper was just a really, smart choice from him to kind of capitalize more on his strengths and pull you guys to late game where things were a little bit messier from on your end. Did Viper bring anything unique and specific that was, just never before seen at the time?
At that point, not sure if he actually started the split micro. He was the one who introduced split micro, but not sure if it was during that tournament, during our best of 21. At one point we're there, his micro, well, actually scratched it. I know when shift micro begins, split micro. It was on the Baltic on the water maps. Jordan and Viper were splitting their galleys left and right. And I didn't want to do it. I was like, I'm not learning anything from the new kids. I'm doing it all the way. But in the end, split micro became so good that I had to join. Still on the weaker level, but I'm part of it.
Oh, that's fascinating. So split micro came to be through galley micro, because back then on the water maps, there was only one type of unit you can make in feudal age, which was, the galley. There was no fire galley, there's no demo raft. And so galley versus galley was what you saw. And Viper and Jordan, to push themselves ahead of people, were split microing, and I guess people had to just catch up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was on Archer a little bit. It was not perfected. As the game progressed, Archers, especially against Mangonels, split micro was more and more into the game. But yeah, Viper and Jordan started that trend.
Later on in 2013, we actually saw the first major tournament come back, which is Clash of the Titans, that included all the top players at the time, and most notably, Viper, Jordan, and Doubt were competing in it, and they ended up with the top spots. But there was some really weird ways that the top spots were decided, and Doubt has more info for us.
During that tournament, I was falling off. Jordan and Viper were dominating. This tournament was fight to determine who is number one. Both of them were super close on the skill level. Jordan ended up beating the Viper 3-2. And Viper last round was against me, and each map won is 1 point. If Viper beats me 5-0, Viper is first. If I win only one game, Jordan is first. Jordan was so nervous because I was already set to be third place. I couldn't care less. And Jordan was like, Doubt, let's practice. Come on, like, I don't need to ride third. Like, what is it? Come on, Doubt, just one game, win one game. Like, Jordan didn't forgive me that one.
And you got
Viper
5-0.
demolished me. Yeah, I got 5 out.
That is insane.
And Jordan actually beat Viper that tournament.
Moving on to 2014, we now saw a best of 21 between the Viper and Jordan. So as they were rising to the top and clearly the two best players in the world, they decided to have a crack at their own best of 21. This time, and for the first time, not including Doubt in this best of 21 event. The Viper vs Jordan best of 21 was an absolute banger. It went to 21 games with a very surprising result. Jordan with 11 points, winning the entire event, and the Viper with only 10. Very close result. As you can see, these two were neck and neck. Sometimes Viper wins and sometimes Jordan wins. But in 2014, Jordan had the claim for a short period of time that he was indeed the number one. Although, to everyone's eyes, it was very close, and the community was eager to see what these two players had in store for them for the coming years. One important factor post-HD release was the fact that we've gotten some content creators on YouTube that really pushed the scene further forward. And although they weren't the biggest right away, they grew to be some of the biggest content creators that we have to date. The most important of these content creators that started up after HD is Spirit of the Law, which is a household name in today's Age of Empires 2 YouTube community. He now has the biggest YouTube channel across Age of Empires 2, and he started around mid-late 2014 creating some content for HD. So the rise of HD not only brought us new civilizations and a lot of new content for the players. But it also brought us new content and put some eyes back on Age of Empires 2 on YouTube. There's one really big name that we haven't heard mention of, and that's Mr. Yo. When did Mr. Yo, obviously the best Chinese player right now, when did he really come into the picture?
I believe he was starting to be a big name after the first Nation Cup by the SY. Yeah, I think that's where he started rising. That was 2014. Yeah, Chinese team won that Nation Cup. That was the first major Nation Cup, and Yo was their leading player.
Wow, so the Chinese team always seems to come in when it's like a team game involved. Like we saw that happen back in like 2003, and now we saw that happen again. And this is around 2013, right?
That's 2014 when SY made the Nations Cup. Yeah, and Yo won. And year after that, 2015, there was the biggest tournament ever at that point, 110K War is Coming tournament. That was a team game tournament, and SY China team was one of the favorites.
And how did that game develop? How did that tournament develop?
At that point, Tyrant made two teams. Yeah, the main team, the Tyrant Legends, was Cab, Viper, Jordan, and me. While the second team was Riot Fire, Bhakti, Slam, and Jibda, that match player.
And were those two teams the biggest and the best at the time?
The second team was actually SY. And there was a little bit of a drama there as well, because the tournament format was 2 groups, 4 players each group, and first team from each group go for the finals. SY was put in the same group as the Tyrant Legends with Viper, Jordan, and me. So it was kind of seen by the community that we wanted to protect our weaker team, so we play against them in finals. Was a small drama, but honestly, I'm not sure if it was intentional or not. In the end, Warlords, the second team, definitely proved their worth. They were the only one competing with us. Because they were getting sponsored, they were getting actually paid to practice, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to compete against that.
Of course. Now we're going to the professional area of Age of Empires, where there's players, there's teams, there's sponsors, and the game seems to be really picking up. And so in that tournament, it was the Tyrant Warlords, the secondary team, against Tyrant Legends in the finals, if I'm understanding. Who won the tournament in the end?
The Legends won the tournament, but they took a lot of games from us. They pushed us on the limit. There was a lot of show matches done between us where they actually beat us. They were playing a really, really good team game.
Yeah, it's awesome to see Tyrant definitely dominating the scene at that point. How many 1v1 tournaments were going on during these years from 2012 to 2014 or 15?
I think not a lot, at least 0 S tier as far as I recall. There was some A tier, lower level tournaments, but the main sponsor of the game was a Tyrant sponsor, and he loved team games, right? So his main focus was hosting those.
Of course, so it seems to be whatever the sponsors want at that point is what gets hosted, because at the end of the day, there's no official Microsoft sponsorship like we have today. It's just kind of what people want to see is what ends up being played.
Yeah, exactly. At 2016, we had a Nations Cup 2 hosted by SY with a really solid prize pool of 47K. And there was also a Canadian team in the finals against China. But again, China proved them like the best Nation Cup team was China for so long. And I guess that's the reason why they host them.
In that Nations Cup 2 in 2015, that was obviously China finishing first and Canada finishing second. That was the first tournament where I played that, I actually got some prize pool or some top tier tournaments. It was a team game event with Canada. I played with none other than Chris, who was obviously a legend from way back in the day, who started playing specifically for this tournament, as far as I'm aware. He obviously grinded the 1v1 ladder to get back into shape, and then basically led our team to victory. It was Chris, Slam, Raw, Mentalist, and myself. At that point, I was actually a very weak player. I only played Huns War. I was very strong in Huns War, like top 10 Huns War player on the ladder. Obviously, you have to start on the ladder. You got to start somewhere. And so I was a strong player in Huns War, but I needed a lot of guidance for the random civs and the team game formats. And I got a lot of help from guys like Chris, Slam, and Mentalist, and even Raw. And we managed to take home second place. And for me personally, on a personal note, I was definitely very hyped to take home at least some prize money from a top tournament. And it was a really good feeling to be part of that team, which did really well. The year 2015 would mark the first 1v1 LAN event in a long time, the Maldives tournament, bringing all the best players from across the world to Maldives to compete in a 1v1 Age of Empires 2 tournament to determine who was the best player. and yet again an opportunity for everyone to prove themselves, and especially the Viper and Jordan, who have had a long history of playing each other and coming really close, as you can see from the past couple of years. The Maldives tournament was a massive tournament because of what was at stake. A $10,000 prize pool, and of course a LAN event with all expenses paid for the players. This was absolutely unheard of at the time, since we haven't really had a single LAN tournament since the early days of Age of Empires 2, and now finally with a 1v1 LAN tournament, everyone was eager to compete. The Maldives tournament was very competitive, and a few surprising things happened. Number one, Jordan lost out to Ryut, who was the number one Brazilian player at the time, and of course this was a minor upset because Ryut was a beast of a player in his own right, but Jordan was clearly considered number one or number two, and so him falling out before the finals was definitely a really big deal. The other player that rose to the top and took over Jordan's spot was actually not Ryut. It was Mr. Yo, who got to the finals and unsurprisingly was facing Viper in the finals. The surprising thing is that Yo took a 2-0 lead in a best of 5 to determine the Maldives champion. However, Viper, being the Viper, reverse swept Mr. Yo, claiming the championship 3-2, beating out Mr. Yo and securing himself once again as the number one player. Some really exciting times though, as you can see. Not just Viper and Jordan there to compete for number one. We now had a new name into the mix, Mr. Yo, of course known for his team game dominance with the Chinese team, but still showing some prowess in 1v1 events. The Viper, though, still comes out on top and is clearly the number one, even though it is by small margin after small margin. He is still the most consistent and the best of the bunch.
2016, I believe, nearly made his first appearance as a tournament host. Maybe he did some before, but this one I remember the most because I played against Viper in the finals and I beat him. At that point, Viper was unbeatable, and it was quite a big deal. It was quite a big deal for community.
And what tournament was
also, that? Clash of the Hippo. It was, I think, actually Empire Wars. The settings were kind of weird. It was not the classic settings.
Well, Empire Wars were not around back then, so it has to be something else. Like Turbo or something, maybe.
It was medium resources, yeah.
Medium
resources.
No,
it was starting feudal age. Resources medium.
Ah.
Not Empire Wars with everything set up, just 3 villages, but feudal age. But okay, 2016 for me, that was maybe the biggest turn point to get to the full time, and that was appearance of ZeroEmpires. He was first one to, I believe, involve the Microsoft into tournaments. We finally got like a proper sponsor, and first tournament ever, battle for Angkor in the new expansion Rise of Rajas, where introduced Malay, Khmer, and Burmese, was hosted by ZeroEmpires. It was like an amazing one-day tournament.
It was played on the HD version or on the Voobly version?
Yes,
HD version.
It was on HD version. It was like in old days, best of one, the whole event, finals, best of 3. It was just 1 weekend tournament. It was so fun to play, and I got hooked up. Right, it was like, damn, there are new civilizations. There's something new to learn, to explore. Microsoft getting into the game, ZeroEmpires, then rising in the stream. You see the numbers. I believe streaming started to become a popular thing as well. For sure, his YouTube was doing amazing. I'm not sure about the Twitch at that point, but YouTube views were the most important thing at that point.
Yeah, we started seeing the rise of content creators, I think, from like 2014 onwards. ZeroEmpires, from before this point, was an established YouTuber. I actually got into Age of Empires 2 through his channel. So he's definitely a very important name for the Age of Empires 2 online community at this point. And then obviously in 2016, got Microsoft involvement through HD tournaments, which brought, as that said, a lot of life into the community, a lot of life for the top players to tournaments to play and participate in, viewers can watch and enjoy. It's also bringing something completely new into the table. It's bringing in the new civilizations, which I think was a huge turning point to Age of Empires 2, because up until this point, it's been basically majority Huns War. Like from 1999 or from 2000 with Age of Conquerors to 2016, it was mainly Huns War on the ladder, mainly Huns War in tournaments, some different civilizations coming up. But for the first time, we now start seeing a tournament based around different civilizations and different balance patches that finally came into the game. So 2016 might be a very important year, actually, for Age of Empires 2 in general.
Yeah, for sure. Like ZeroEmpires getting Microsoft involved, and like Microsoft getting actually a new expansion after so many years. Like after they shut down the Microsoft Zone, 10 years after, we get actually a proper support from Microsoft. Not only in DLC, but also they're putting the prize money. And that was like amazing thing to see. After the success of the first tournament, Battle of Angkor, ZeroEmpires form Escape Gaming organization that would serve as an organization to host the tournaments and host the leagues through the whole year, like giving us something like a full year tournament calendar that players can play, see, and schedule during the year with plenty of tournaments. It was insane, and I believe sponsored by the Microsoft.
It was around this time as well in 2016 and 2017 where we had the Wololo Kingdoms, so basically the 3 expansions that were on HD being ported over to Voobly. And so Voobly, with the same graphics as the original game, again, they didn't have the HD graphics, so they had, like, let's quote unquote the crusty graphics, but they now had the new civilizations. And keep in mind, Voobly had the user patch, which was basically like a community patch for the pathing, for the quality of life changes. It had all of that implemented on the Voobly platform, and now we had the civilizations that were played on the HD edition. Furthermore, we had like the 1.7 speed game, so like the actual competitive game on Voobly now had the civilizations from DE. And take a look at this. Around 2017, there were 275,000 downloads of the Wololo Kingdoms expansion on Voobly. That just gives you an idea of the player base that was, around at the time. And obviously those downloads occurred over a few years, but it just goes to show how popular Voobly became shortly after the HD tournaments started taking place, and shortly after ZeroEmpires got Microsoft involved. This was a huge change to Voobly because not only did this mean that the new civs are playable, it means that the community playing actually shifted to random civilization 1v1s, at least amongst the pros, and amongst the casual players in team games, they had a lot more civilizations to play from and to pick from, and so it basically revolutionized how Age of Empires 2 was played. So although 2016 was a very important year, maybe one of the most important years for Age of Empires 2, 2017 came and was maybe even the most important year in Age of Empires 2 history because of several events that took place and several content creators that started to rise with tournaments in this year.
As Hera said, 2017 was maybe the rise of competitive play. First thing we had is Escape Gaming Euro Cup.
In the 2017 Escape Euro Championship, a 1v1 LAN event played on the HD edition of the game, we saw TheViper and Leary go head-to-head in a finals. However, there was a couple other important names that took part of this event, MBL and Tato. Those were 2 rising players at the time, and MBL was known for a very unique style. He brought laming to a very high popularity. Of course, at the time, everybody in the top scene knew that you can, lame a boar, steal it from your opponent, bring it back to your base using the scout, and all that was completely fine. However, MPL was the guy to do this literally every game, sending his scout forward right away, taking as many sheep as possible, taking the boar if he finds it, and bringing it back to his base so he can enjoy with his villagers. This gave MBL a very notorious reputation as the lamer boy in tournaments. Tato brought a different style to tournaments. Tato was the guy that would prepare different strategies, play some off-meta civilizations, and try to throw his opponent off guard to try to secure top spots in tournaments. Both of these names are very important to Age of Empires 2 history, as they both go on to be easily considered top 8 and top 5 players. Back to the finals though, we had TheViper versus Leary. And the very interesting thing is that Leary was considered the underdog because, of course, Viper was the number 1. And to be an underdog, he had to bring something different to the table. What exactly did Leary bring to the table to challenge the Viper in this tournament?
Leary was a new blood to the scene, and as a new player, new blood, he bring a really impressive range units micro. Like Viper and Jordan start with a split micro on range units, and Leary with the dance micro, he was dodging shots. Even Ballistic couldn't stop him. Even to today, right? He's the most impressive archer player we have.
Despite Leary's good micro, Viper ended up taking the tournament home, and Viper yet again with another victory. But Leary definitely put himself on the radar, and a lot of people, especially considering how young he was, looked up to him and looked to see what he can bring to the table and whether he can actually challenge Viper's throne in the coming years. Leary is a very important figure for Age of Empires 2, and this was the start of his rise to the top.
During the Euro Cup, Tato was the player as well, and that's where Tato and Viper meet first time and bond the friendship. And a year later, Tato joined the Tyrant. I meet the Tato as well, and we play with him Battle of Africa, and first time the whole team meets in the LAN at Nilis Apartment Cup. Also, Tato was most known for his tournament preparation. The way he dropped, the way he prepared for the tournaments, he stepped it up from the old cab base, he rise it like on a way higher level, and he, well, forced the whole community, the whole top scene to keep it up. We all now need to prepare for the tournaments way higher because of the Tato. You know he will draft differently, he will have a counter picks and so on, and you need to do your homework now as well. Thanks to Tato. And also during 2017, we had the Nations Cup number 3, hosted on SY. Again, LAN event in China, in Fuzhou. And first time ever not played the finals with China team, but actually Brazil and Finland played the finals there. And the third super important thing that happened in 2017 is start of King of the Desert and rise of the Memp as a streamer on his own channel. Before that, I believe he was mostly streaming with Katsuni on Voobly official channel and so on. But 2017, at least for me, marked Memp as a streamer to go for every single tournament. His channel started growing. His tournament did amazing first QTD. And again, it was Viper against Leary in an amazing finals that end up 5-4 for Viper. But Leary now challenging the undisputed Viper. Now we can see that Leary can actually match Viper and even good chance to beat him. 2018, there was a new team game tournament on the line. World Clan League is in the legacy now. We have a new brand. It's called Battle of Africa. And Mem made that. Again, Mem became a really, really big, important figure in the Age of Empires community. And this time, there was a new kids in the block. Tyrant, with refreshments of the Jordan and Viper in the team. Very young for some time. But now we got old as well. There are new kids, and that will be AM with team of the Leary, MBL, Hart,
And
Nico, but not Hera yet.
Yes.
Not Hera yet, actually. I was thinking you will be there.
No. Not for the first one. Not for the first one.
Well, that tournament ended up with Tyrant winning, right?
Yeah.
I think quite convincingly. Yeah, finals was 4-0. Well, again, we were responsible with the Tyrant. Aftermath was high skill players, but nobody to lead them, I believe. They were like group of full high skill players that know each other on the ladder, but doesn't really have those team game tournament preparation working habit. That's the best way to put it, I believe.
Yeah. You had a group of amateurs going up against a group of professionals, and although going into the finals, people were thinking AM could actually be like the favorites, could actually win. Going into the finals, I think it clearly showed that like the strategy and the experience from the Team Tyrant was just way too superior. Although AM were highly skilled players, they just couldn't quite, even take a game in that finals. But still a great showing, and the start of a new team on the block. And of course, kind of led by Leary, who was doing really well in 1v1s as well.
But yeah, Leary was kind of at that point too young to lead the team. Another important event that happened in 2018 is beginning of Nili's Apartment Cup, the first one ever hosted by Nili himself in Hamburg. With this time only 6 invited players. Nili didn't have a sponsor, I believe. He was pulling this all out by himself, and that's why he limited himself by inviting only European players that are top level to lower the cost, right? Understandable. I don't think there was drama about that, and there should not be. He did all this by himself, and he did an amazing job. And at the finals of Nili Apartment Cup, again, Viper against Leary. That is becoming a thing for the next 5 years. And Viper this time taking it more convincingly, 5-2 against Leary.
What's very interesting about that rivalry between Viper and Leary is that it was very clear that Viper was the number 1 player, but it was also very clear that Leary was the number 2 player. And both of them kind of showed up, destroyed most of the players in their path to get to the finals. But then in the finals, it was always Viper just barely beating out Leary by an edge or winning him by a significant margin. The best Leary was able to get was basically, a very close result, but still a loss and getting second. Still shouldn't take away from Leary's performance. Being a number 2 player, especially behind Viper at that time, was still a very, very solid, result, and definitely something to be happy with for every tournament that came. While these events were happening on, Nili's channel, on Mem's channel, on Twitch, there's also really important things happening behind the scenes on YouTube. Spirit of the Law and T90 Official, of course, these are 2 of the biggest YouTube channels today, but they were also starting to take off on YouTube. Spirit of the Law, mainly since the start of HD Edition, started his channel way back around 2013, 2014, as far as we know at least, and has really, risen since then and starting to see really big numbers up until, up around this point in 2018. And T90, although he, started his YouTube career after Spirit of the Law a few years later, with the release of the Forest Nothing video, which went viral on YouTube, T90 also started being a really big player in the AV2 community as far as a caster / YouTube content creator. And of course, T90 having a really big channel on YouTube, it was only natural that he'd get into the tournament scene himself alongside Nili and Memp, and he came in with Hidden Cup 1.
And that was the most unique tournament we, ever had. Players and entities were hidden, and viewers loved it. Viewers absolutely loved it. I believe that was more like a small test tournament, like closer to the show match. Don't think there were like big qualification and so on. Prize pool was relatively small, but the viewer numbers were insane. Peak viewers were 6K for a first tournament, just like that. We knew the second edition is coming and that second edition will be even better.
Although the identities were hidden in Hidden Cup 1, of course, as per the tournament, Viper ended up winning as expected. However, the runner-up was actually MBL this time around, losing in the finals 4-2 to Viper. So MBL taking a nice result there for himself, and Viper further cementing himself as the best player in the world, taking home another 1v1 tournament victory.
In 2018, we kind of established some major events that had a big success. Now, we could only say that, yes, that in 2019, those events will, well, get a second edition. And that's exactly what happened. At 2019, first tournament was King of the Desert 2, hosted by the MEMP, and again, the same suspects. First place Viper, second place Leary. I have to notice that on the Arabia type, Leary pushed Viper to the limit, right? When it was mixed maps, feels like Leary was doing a bit weaker against Viper.
Definitely.
And followed up by KOTD, it was another LAN event by Mr. Neely's Apartment Cup 2, and this time the viewer records were broken. This is the first time Age of Empires community got 10K viewers live. That was a big deal. And also the tournament was sponsored only by the community. That's, I think, worth mentioning. Like, community gave the full prize pool. A good part went to the also obviously travel and accommodation. And prize pool went to the 14K, which is very solid, right?
And at that point, we're now seeing the community in full swing without really necessarily more Microsoft investment as well. The community is really making a name for itself, supporting these tournament hosts, bringing in over 10,000 viewers on the live stream. It's clearly showing extra interest in Age of Empires 2, and you'll see why later, but Microsoft is very clearly watching these numbers at this point because they're about to get right back into the AV2 scene in a really big way in 2019.
So after Hidden Cup 1 being a major success, we knew Hidden Cup 2 is coming. And right after the Neely's Apartment Cup 2, Hidden Cup 2 was there. Again, breaking all the records, even having more peak viewers than Neely's Apartment Cup, the live event. Hidden Cup 2 was probably the most hyped tournament at that point. 17K viewers, live, peak viewers, and the finals delivered. Finals was the Max against Viper, with Max pushing Viper to the maximum limits. Final score was 40 for the Viper, but Max had a massive lead 3-1 with 3 match points, but at that point, it was hard to close the games against Viper, close the set.
Yeah, Viper coming back and taking that victory as well. It is worth noting in Hidden Cup 2, Leary, although he wasn't the runner-up, he actually won his round, but then had to drop out of the tournament because he had a personal emergency come up. And so Leary was not losing Hidden Cup 2. He actually had to drop out due to some unfortunate circumstances. But of course, Max stepped up to the table and got to the finals, which was a great result from him. And he got a lot of hype to his name in the 1v1 scene, even though he was mainly known as a team game player at that point. Now the community saw him as a very well-rounded player, dominating a lot of tournaments with the Finnish team in team games, and now also doing really good work for himself in 1v1s. A really big step forward for the Max as a player.
2019 was a very busy year. Not only KOTD 2, Neely's Apartment Cup, Hidden Cup 2, but we also had another LAN event hosted by the Escape Gaming in Manchester Escape Championship League Finals. And that was played by now Team Secret. That was kind of Tyrant, Aftermath, and Suomi.
Those three were considered to be the main three, or the three top teams for team games. And of course, the only team name missing there is the Chinese team. They actually got fourth and weren't invited to the finals in that event. Still a strong team for team games, but just outside of the top three. And of course, the top three had a really nice run in that tournament. There was a mix of 1v1s, a mix of 2v2s, 3v3s, and 4v4s. It was actually a very interesting tournament, all streamed from Manchester on the Escape Gaming channel. And at that point, you had Team Secret taking home the victory. Team Secret was basically Team Tyrant, and they added Tato to the roster. So you had Tato, Doubt, Viper, and Jordan. Team Aftermath was now including me. So you had me, Hera, Nikov, MBL, Leary, and Hart. a 5-man roster, and then you had the Finnish team, the Suomi team, which had Zupi, Rubenstock, Velez, and the Max. 3 very strong teams and a really nice tournament. AM second, Finnish team third, and of course Team Secret number 1. In late 2019 marks the last important date that we're going to cover in this video. November 14th, 2019, we had the launch of Definitive Edition. Microsoft saw how strong the support of the community was, helping us host tons of tournaments starting from NEC and KOTD and of course Hidden Cup, all of these funded and powered by the community. Microsoft decided to step back in and launch a refined and better version of the game to be played through Steam. So after all these years, we now have Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition as an official game from Microsoft on an official platform that people can play. This is the version that we play currently today, and we've received countless patches basically once every month since then. We've also received plenty of new DLCs and new civilizations, new campaigns, new features, and we now sit at 45 civilizations total at this current day of recording, which is an absolutely insane number of civilizations, especially considering how the game started out with only 13 with the launch of Age of Kings. Such an insane 20-year progression, and we now currently have the best state of Age of Empires 2 as a community that we've ever had. Gone are the days of community-sponsored tournaments. We now have regular sponsorships from Microsoft and even a massive sponsorship and tournament series from Red Bull with the Red Bull Wololo franchise, harnessing over 6 tournaments with the 7th one already announced. Red Bull and Microsoft are massive players in the Age of Empires 2 scene and are the main forces pushing it forward. Viewer numbers are reaching all-time highs, with every tournament hitting tens of thousands of viewers at least, and we're even coming close to 100,000 live concurrent viewers on these bigger tournaments, with Hidden Cup and Red Bulls hitting around 70 to 80,000 concurrent viewers. Absolutely insane and unheard of numbers for the AW2 community as we push to new heights. Of course, the meta during 2019 to 2024 has been ever evolving and adapting, because now there is a reason for metas to change. There's new patches, there's new civilizations, there's new maps. Because of how active the community is and the game is, there's no one set meta anymore. The meta is very fluid and will continue to adapt depending on the situation. There are also a ton of different top players that are willing to put in the practice hours, willing to grind it out and bring the best strategies forward to every tournament. We also have many full-time streamers, both players and also casters and tournament hosts, that all work together to make the scene as eventful and as fruitful as possible. The community and the viewers are at an all-time high as well. Of course, tons of viewers on tournaments, but there's also a lot of viewers going around on all kinds of social platforms. We now have a lot of Age of Empires 2 creators as well as main accounts on all kinds of social platforms like Twitter and Instagram. We now have many YouTube channels that have reached hundreds of thousands of subscribers, most notably T90 Official and Spirit of the Law being the 2 channels to break 300,000 subscribers on YouTube, Spirit of the Law being the current #1 YouTube channel. And of course, these numbers were unheard of just 10 years ago. The Age of Empires 2 scene as we know it today is actually very healthy. We have regular tournaments, of course, S-tier 1v1 and sometimes team game events that bring the entire community together. The players will practice and play, the casters and tournament hosts will come together and watch and break it down for the audience, and the audience is all eagerly watching, each of them supporting and cheering on their favorite player or their favorite team. Microsoft support is in full force, and the game could not be in a better spot today. This is the wonderful story of Age of Empires 2 that went from a fantastic game released in 1999, going through several changes up until the early 2000s, where it was abandoned by Microsoft as a pretty dead game, to be revived afterwards by the community, and then around 15 years later, from 2006 with the fall of Zone and online Age of Empires 2, to 2019 to have Age of Empires 2 be released with a final product fully incorporated with online for players to play and tournaments to happen. It's such an insane transformation, and it's honestly an epic tale of an epic game that continues to prove its worth. 25 years later, and Age of Empires 2 is still one of the best RTS games, and in my opinion, one of the greatest games of all time. Thank you so much for watching. This video took a lot of effort for me to make, and of course, I could not have done it without Doubt. He put in a ton of effort to bring all this information that you basically just can't find online anymore, because it's really just not there. And so huge shout out to Doubt. If you want to know more from him, I highly recommend you check him out on Twitch and YouTube. He's a professional player, still going strong after all these years with a successful YouTube and Twitch channel that you guys can go support him at. And he's very, very active around the community all these years later. Not the top 1 that we knew him as in this video, but definitely still a top 10 player and worth supporting.
Thank you, I guess.
That's it. Okay, perfect. Good ending. With all that said, make sure you guys like the video and share it with other people that are interested in Age of Empires 2 story and history. And I hope you guys learned something new. And of course, if we did miss anything in these 25 beautiful years, do let us know in the comments if you have something that is worth mentioning for others to read as well. We love to harness this community feeling around this video, and I hope you guys really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching from me and Doubt.